All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. We really appreciate everyone being here. We know this isn't the ideal place to be spending your afternoon. We will try to keep this to about 2 hours, or try to limit this until we get to 6 o'clock. And we do have some stuff to go through as a committee, and then we will open it up for public input. So I will open the meeting of the School Building Committee. And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Medfield School Building Committee is conducted by remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. So I did read that off. I know we do have people in person. Technically, the order still is in place until June 15th, so we do have people on Zoom potentially. But we have obviously a good crowd here today. So thank you. I am going to. I was gonna say Jess is here from the school committee, and she will open up the school committee since we do have a quorum for the school committee as well.
So, I opened this meeting of the school committee through roll call. Anyone? Right. And Mayo Shaybrook here. Leah Brim here. And Jessica Riley here. And this meeting of the school committee is open. Thank you.
Would note also that the meeting is being recorded for the public. And then we'll do quick introductions for the school building committee. My name is Mike Quinlan. I am chair of the school building committee. To my left,
Ina Mayo Shaybrook, school committee member as well.
Jeff Marsden, superintendent of schools. Leo Brown, vice chair of the school committee.
to my right,
Tom Burke, building committee. Michael Weber, building committee. Bob building school. Bob, so anyone maybe represent.
Steve Brennan, building principal, Dale Street.
oh. Too much.
Can you hear the back?
No.
All right, we'll speak up.
We're going to turn the fans down. I know that's not ideal, but
I just can't hear anything, sorry.
yeah. And I would note also for the panel, the microphone is here. Project your voice as much as possible because this is being recorded. The microphone's right in front of us here. So again, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you coming down. What we're going to do is I'll take you through our agenda for today, and then we'll get started. Okay, so first up, we're going to address points that were raised in the petition. There were 5 bullet points outlined in the petition, and the school building committee will be taking those up specifically. We will talk about a question that was raised at our last school building committee about temporary swing space. We'll talk about some of the advantages that led us to our decision on Wheelock. We will revisit those. Talk about the pros and cons for Dale versus the Wheelock site. We'll talk about schedules, the schedule that we are currently on versus an alternative schedule, and then we will bring it to public input. We have a lot to get through. Let me first ask, who is new here? Who has not been a part of any of our forums? Okay, we've got a handful, not too many, but a handful. Great. Okay. All right, so first up, this is for the school building committee. The petition noted that, quote, Medfield voters previously approved the purchase and donation of Wheelock land as part of concerted wellfield protection initiatives. So sitting a second school in the Elm Street location is counter to town wishes and harms environmentally sensitive contiguous open space. So what you see here is where the new school building is proposed. And this green line here is the well protection district. So you can see that outside the building itself actually sits right outside the well protection district. And with the new parking lot, we'll actually sit within it. And at the
Hey, Mike, sorry. Do you mind? It's so
Oh,
hard to hear
sorry.
back here. Sorry. Thank you.
So I'll try to do this. But basically, oh, thank you. That's even better. All right. lost it.
Do you have a hand mic by chance?
Yeah, could you do this to the mic, maybe?
What's that?
Could you speak to the mic, maybe?
Yes.
Might make it easier.
There's no speaker though. This is really just for recording.
Gotcha.
But I will speak to the mic.
Does
So-
the school have a microphone set up here? I think most schools do have some kind of
I don't think we have speakers and microphones.
Two speakers.
department.
Is there a way to tie into those by any chance?
Intercom.
It's intercom.
Jeff, we're gonna try and get one of those classroom sets.
Steve,
Uh,
is that a piece of stuff?
A new school, we lock them up.
So first up, opening it up to the committee to revisit this. This is not new. The issue of water protection has been discussed for over a year and a half. We had our professional team examine it. Also, the director of the Public Works examined it. And it was deemed that it is absolutely permissible to build this building where it's currently proposed without significant risk to our drinking water. We have looked at this with professional engineers and still have not evaluated, we still have not heard exactly what the risk is that is part of this petition. That's a little bit hard for us to address, but I will say, because it has come up, someone has asked about stormwater. So stormwater is a key issue in regards to how we deal with runoff from paved areas and a building. And so currently, as it stands right now, all stormwater that falls onto the pavement runs right off into the ground. So it takes with it oils and other chemicals that come off of vehicles, and it puts it right into the ground. That's the current condition, actually, I believe at both Dale and Wheelock. The new building would address not only the new building, but it would address the Wheelock pavement as well. As well, it would take the cars that currently park on the grass at Wheelock and put them on actual pavement. So that would be a Mass DEP approved stormwater system, which actually removes the oils from the water before recharging that water back into the ground. So this is why it is deemed safe from a stormwater perspective. And so this is something that I don't believe anyone from the SBC has any other comments on that. This is something that we did address back in the fall before we made our vote.
I actually didn't realize that the current doesn't drain off into actual legitimate drains.
Right, it was built in the 70s, and so there is no stormwater system there currently. So all of those oils just run right into the ground. So there would be an improvement from that perspective.
Can I just ask a question? Do you have that study available? I think that was the question.
We have a letter from the civil engineer that states this. It's posted on the website for the project. But if you, well, I hope that's better.
That's better.
Great, thank you. So the letter from the civil engineer that discusses this specifically in stormwater is all posted on the project
The study
website.
though itself. I saw the letter, but the study itself with the detail, is that also available?
It's all in the letter. It basically outlines, they reviewed the code, they reviewed how this building would sit on the site, they reviewed all of that. It's all part of the letter.
It might be coastal planning.
Correct.
We'll have a peer review.
Yes. So if this project gets approved, it does still go through a series of permitting exercises where it goes through planning board, it goes through conservation commission, and all of that has to meet up with current codes.
And those are open to the public also?
Yep. Absolutely.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yes.
So can you just be sure to address though the other findings about the water issues that were in the PSR? Pesticide residue that was found in that report. Also, environmental engineers have commented that actually air pollution from increased emissions actually contributes to decline in water quality. Parking on the grass is actually better environmentally than parking on pavement because it provides a natural filter. The letter from the engineer was also from an engineering firm that was paid by the town.
So
for
if
the water for the water treatment facility.
hold on, Chris, this isn't public comment period.
Oh, sorry.
We're gonna try to keep this to, we're gonna get through our issues. You can certainly, you're gonna be given time to ask your questions. This is all new information that you've been bringing up. This isn't something that you put in front of us before. So we're going to get through our presentation. If we can hold our questions, thank you. All right, next up, the second bullet was when the town voted in 2018 to fund the $1 million feasibility study, it was for the addition and or renovation or replacement of Dale Street Elementary School located at 45 Adams Street, implying that the current grade 4 to 5 school would remain where it is and not result in a long-term liability for taxpayers for the addition of yet another building to town inventory. So the language that is in the warrant article is language that's supplied by the MSBA. The MSBA requires you to put in the address of the existing school so that it can be identified as the project site. Does not mean that that is exactly where it needs to go. Matter of fact, they require us to look at alternative sites as part of our study. As part of that, that's something that's part of the normal MSBA process. So simply having the address in there does not indicate that that is where the project has to go.
But it doesn't say relocation in there.
If you can hold your questions for the end, please.
It's not a question.
It does, it says replacement. Sir, if you can hold your questions. Next up is proximities. A location also contrary to MSBA statute 963 CMR 2.05 stating a preference for a school location that shall be proximate to other facilities such as libraries, museums, parks, natural resources, natural study areas, and business which would enhance the proposed educational program. So this is just a proximity map which indicates the new school adjacent to the Wheelock School and a quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile, and 1 mile radii. And you can see that there are many resources, including the Holmquist land just to the south, Danielson Pond, Kingsbury Pond, Metacomet Park, a public library, all within about a mile of the school, as well as even more just adjacent to it. That said, the MSBA has also reviewed this according to their statutes and have no concerns. Next up, placement of a second school on Elm Street will result in 4 schools within 1 mile of each other, making existing traffic problems worse and create new traffic problems that didn't exist before while creating public safety issues for students, walkers, and bikers, plus increased police, fire, EMT response times. So first up, we already have 4 schools within 1.2 miles of each other. Dale Memorial Campus and High School Middle, if we use the main entrance to the high school at the data point, they're 1.2 miles apart. And the Wheelock Elementary site and the potential new elementary site are 1.1 miles. So you can see this is not something that is new. What I would like to ask Chief Garrett, because this statement that that somehow police response times would increase and public safety might be decreased.
So I have a much louder voice than
Yeah.
Mr. Quinlan,
Thank
raising
you.
children, this is my voice.
Make sure you hit that microphone.
If that microphone can't hear me. I'll get to a couple of things that I think have been the pressing concerns. Traffic. I'm not going to sit here and say that a new location will not increase traffic. I guess I do need it. Obviously, if we build a new school, there are more people attending an area. So the question for us, though, is that we've already got a school at this location. So we're very familiar with the traffic patterns and concerns that already exist at the Wheelock School. So it's really about timing. If the schools have the same start and finish times, then we have to accommodate for an influx of traffic. That's all mitigatable. We can mitigate this just by seeing what those patterns are. We won't know entirely what they are until we see the influx. And there are a lot of things that factor into that decision. We have had a very challenging and unique year with COVID. So we have a lot of people, parents opting to drop their children off. I don't think when this project is completed, there's going to be the same concerns. And I do believe that bus use will resume its normal activity again. If the schools go off at a staggered time, then really it's not about impacting traffic as in terms of an increase in volume. It's more that it is an increase in time. So we'll have the same traffic patterns and concerns that'll take place just over a stretch of time. So whether it's school starts at 8 o'clock through 9:30 and then release times are an hour and a half. All these things, though, we have worked with the company to go ahead and look at some potential problems, to identify either lane closures or one-turn only lanes, to mitigate some of these issues. I'm confident that whether the location remains at Dale or goes to Wheelock, we will be able to tackle whatever traffic issues come. So I would say from my perspective, in terms of traffic enforcement, it is not a huge area of concern for us, just basically a problem, and we find a solution for it.
Can I just ask a simple question? Was there a traffic study done, and if so, when?
There was a traffic study done. We actually had a traffic study meeting.
It was done in the fall.
It was
Yeah,
fall.
that's correct. 2020. I mean, yes, 2020.
Yes.
Yeah, fully not back in school.
Correct. So, yep, absolutely. So it's interesting because the traffic study actually, what it showed is because we couldn't bus as many kids, there was actually an increase in traffic because more parents were dropping off. So we had more vehicles that were arriving at schools on a regular basis. And then we also compared, we did traffic counts on 109 and South Street just to see how it compared to pre-COVID numbers. And then we factored everything accordingly.
So I just want to give you a point of view. So I live on Medfield Street, I'm not trying to direct, but this is an important thing in talking traffic. So I witnessed every morning during COVID, I never had cars in front of my house. I've lived there for 21 years, so I know what traffic looks like from roughly 7:15 to 7:35. I'm totally cool with it. The moment you guys went full in, now in front of my house, and anyone who drives their kids to high school knows, now they're in line. So I'm just throwing out like the 2020 date is still not a real traffic pattern, because it's half and half. And I witnessed it firsthand in Medicon. No traffic all year until they went full back, and now it's bumper to bumper.
Right, and I do want to get back to this, and I've cut other people off, so I apologize if I actually cut you off.
Yep.
One other thing I just want to add on that is that we're still not back to, right, we're still not busing correctly, we're still not busing the numbers that we typically would. 40%, so when we get back to full busing, that should alleviate some of that. Now, Metacom is more about the high school and middle school, so I can't promise that that'll be the case.
Oh, and
But-
that will go away, I get that.
Yeah.
It's just the flow of what's going to happen on South Street on that.
Understood, yeah. We can talk more when we get into the public dialogue.
I just
and
want to
other
address the
thing-
second part of this before we, because it was
Sure.
about safety.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so public safety. First and foremost, I want to assure and reassure the students, parents, and faculty of those who attend Wheelock School that you are safe, right? Because if we're suggesting that a second school somehow creates a safety issue, then that would speak poorly about our safety plans at Wheelock now. We do have plans in place. We are very well prepared to have an emergency response there. That response has been tested and tried. We know that we can get to these locations quickly. Our officers are different than the fire department in the sense that while we have a public safety facility, our officers are actually out in the community. We have both a car that is designated to the Wheelock area in the event that there is an emergency at one of the schools, and we have an SRO that floats around as well as an SRO liaison. And that liaison is to coordinate between the school superintendent, busing, and myself to make sure that we can deal with any issues for traffic or any emergencies. Our response time to the schools is under 2 minutes. We regularly train for active shooter and these type of emergency responses without getting into the tactical side of it. We're very confident that our plans in place meet the national standards, if not exceed them. The addition of a new school to that location presents no additional public safety threat in my estimation or in the estimation of our Metrolec teams who we coordinate active shooter training with. So that area of it, you should feel very confident that we do have a school in place and we have plans and programs in place to address safety issues at that location. I'll be happy to turn it back to you unless there are other questions.
The only other thing on public safety is there's been some discussion about sidewalks. And so we did just do a quick study showing the difference between the Wheelock neighborhood to the left where the current school is, has everything in green has sidewalks, everything in red does not. So it is able to reach downtown if people so chose for bike riding or walking. Dale Street on the right is at this location here, and you can see the downtown area, plenty of sidewalks, but to the north and east, less so. These streets, Phillip and Cross, have been noted as not having sidewalks. But there are sidewalks on Knollwood, Stephen, and some of the other smaller streets, as well as this continues further down South Street as well, where there are sidewalks. So just wanted to make sure that we discussed that there are safe walkable sidewalks in the area.
Can I ask a question? Isn't Wheelock used as a landing site for Medfield when the town needs it on the south side of town?
It is currently a designated landing zone. We also have a helipad out at the Kingsbury Club as well. That's what that circle is going in, for those of you who kind of wondered why we had a random circle in the parking lot.
But how would this building affect, I mean, if you're in because there was recently a motorcycle car accident and
Yes.
Medfield was called and stopped from the Wheelock site, how would this affect that?
Would you still be able to use the fields, I guess, there's still the major soccer fields that could be used as a landing zone?
So not only can we still use those fields, but we also have areas designated over by the Charles River. I think you see some of the model airplanes using that. Again, we have the Kingsbury Club location. So we can use open spaces. The only thing we're looking for when we have a landing zone is that we're able to have quick access to get to any type of med flight, and that access is free from overhead lines so that they can get in and out safely. So in terms of
Interestingly
finding the
enough,
space.
the fields at Wheelock used to be an airport at one
Yes.
point in time, or had a landing strip.
Anything else?
Okay, thanks, Chief. All right, next up, enrollment projections. The petition stated a larger, more expensive school is being proposed as necessary based on actual versus original projected student enrollment numbers and project costs publicized at the time the SBC voted to relocate grades 4 to 5 to Wheelock, not taking into account the additional expense of reuse or abandonment of Dale Street School, field replacements, infrastructure needs beyond water, and long-term traffic mitigation. I won't go through all of this text. This is all about the MSBA's enrollment methodology and how they came up with their numbers. So we won't get into that in detail. But essentially, their numbers are what we have to agree to, or we can challenge them on it, but we need to provide them with data that says we don't believe them, and this is why. But we did sign a agreement to meet that enrollment back all pre-COVID, and we are currently working off of an enrollment projection of 575 students. At its maximum capacity, I should say, or not from day one. And then in terms of whether or not we took into account the Dale Street schools, field replacements, infrastructure, water, et cetera, you can see here, this is the all of the items that we looked at in terms of other expenses. So the demo there's 3 options for the existing school. We can demolish it, we can mothball it, or we can reuse it. Our current thinking is that it should be reused. We see it as an asset in town, and we're exploring that. We're working on what that might look like for costs in terms of possibly reusing it for Parks and Rec as an option. We are looking at other things as well through the permanent building committee. I'm hoping that we get some information back from the other architect for that project in the next week or so, and then we'll be able to discuss that in further detail. We intend to have as much as possible data for you if we do get to a fall town vote, but we did evaluate partial demo. We looked at replacement fields both at Dale and Wheelock fields, and then we looked at mothballing some or a portion of the building. Oops, sorry, I jumped on. These are the preliminary estimates that we were using to make our decision. We have what's called the base repair option. This is basically an MSBA required minimum you would need to do to bring this building up to code. That doesn't mean having it ready to receive any growth. It's a frame of reference, meaning if we just brought this building up to code, it would cost us approximately $40 million to make this a code acceptable school. And then they also require us to look at an addition renovation. So the addition renovation was looked at and evaluated, and that came out to about 80.5 million in total project cost. The next two options were new build options, new buildings on the Dale Street site, and they came in at 72.3 and 72 respectively. And then the Wheelock site options we looked at were 77.3 and 76.3. So those were the five options that we looked at when we made our decision. Then we looked at what portion the MSBA would pay, because that's the other thing that factors into this, is how much the state will reimburse us for the project. So we could say with some level of certainty that this is what we estimate the town's portion will pay. And you can see Dale Street ad reno, 59.9 million town share. The new builds, 54.6 and 54.5 roughly. And then the Wheelock site, 59.4 and 58.6.
Since we can't receive the numbers from back here.
Yeah.
Is this on your site?
It is, yep. It's in multiple locations. But if you have any trouble finding it, just let us know. Someone will be able to help you, and we can show you all the details.
And is there a comparison similar to when they did the Blake middle school to high school project where they renovated current buildings to what they have today? Is there anything you can compare against that?
In what sense?
In the sense that when they did the study, did they jump in with it's automatically going to be a renovation, no idea for new building? Or let's look at what a new building would cost versus renovating Blake to make it middle school versus the old high school. Just so I can try in my mind to kind of do an apples to apples.
Sure. So if we start from the beginning, we actually looked at Larry Edwards. How many options did we look at? Something like 19 or 20 options way back when.
Can you tell me who Larry is?
I'm sorry, Larry is our principal architect from Arrow Street. So we started with, we started looking at the town from a site selection perspective. We looked all across the town. We looked at every possible site that would fit a school of this size, that would be reasonable size to be able to accommodate something like this. We looked at all town-owned property. That helped us narrow it down. Minimum 10 acres, that helped us narrow it down further. And we identified 6 potential sites out of that. From there, we did an evaluation of those 6 sites, and it quickly became clear to the SBC that there were really only 2 legitimate sites, the existing location and the Wheelock location. Once we narrowed it down to 2 sites, we did a bunch of studies on each site. And again, we were required by the MSBA to look at an addition renovation of the existing school, and then new build options at both sites. That narrowed it down to these 5 options, and then we ultimately selected the G1 option. So all of those studies are available. I'm happy to present them to you. They're very extensive.
This is just, can you just give us some perspective as to why the building committee chose this based on these numbers?
We will. I promise we're gonna go through. I just want to go through things that we want to make sure we're setting the basis here, and then we'll talk about why we made it.
Similar, I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't help.
I promise we'll get there. I want to make sure we get through all of this first, and then we will open it up. We'll give plenty of time for comments and questions.
Mike, actually, while you're there, though, can you just go back to our first slide, the very first slide that had the warrant article language?
This one?
Yeah.
So because there was, and you are selectively taking.
I'm trying not to. So I'm going to give you an opportunity,
Thank you
Jared.
very much, Mike. So this has been one of the comments that's been bouncing back and forth, that the Dale is using wrong information. So what I'd like you to do publicly is validate this information. Okay? So we're all
Which
together.
information?
I'm about to give it. So the document we filed with the MSBA, the new Wheelock, the cost per square foot is $630 per square foot.
That's correct.
For a 98,000 square foot building.
That's correct.
The cost for a new building, and this includes all the site work, it includes all of the infrastructure. So all of those costs that are buried in, this is what we submitted, correct?
Yep.
So $630 for Wheelock. The new construction here is $590 per square feet.
The new construction.
New
Yes,
construction here
correct.
was 590 per square feet.
That's correct.
And the ad reno here was 560 per square,
Yeah.
560 per square foot.
Those numbers are correct, absolutely.
The second follow-up to that is you have publicly stated in multiple meetings that the ad reno is a more expensive option. And but that's because it's 115,000
That's
square
correct.
feet. It is 17,000 square feet more, number
That is
one.
also correct.
Number two, according to the MSBA site, for all the projects they are doing, on average, ad reno projects are $30 to $40 cheaper per square foot. That comes directly from the MSBA site.
Correct, because you're working with an existing building.
Correct. So why is the ad reno here?
Because this building has a basement.
The design that was presented to the town, the only option that was presented for ad reno in the final recommendations was 115,000
That's
square
correct.
feet. Whether it had a basement or not, what we have been asking for is an apples to apples comparison of the 98,000 square foot ad reno, even if just the facade was addressed.
We cannot ignore the fact that it has a basement, as much as I would love to. This building, as part of an ad reno, we have to bring the entire building to current code. That includes the basement, which means that now needs to become fully accessible, but cannot be used from an educational perspective. We can't put classrooms in the basement, but we have to bring it up to code. So we have to spend money to bring up a basement that could be used for storage, maybe some mechanical space. But that's why it has a larger square footage, number one. Number two, when you're working with an existing building and you're trying to shoehorn in new classrooms into an existing structure, it doesn't work as efficiently. So while you're correct, cost per square foot is typically lower because you're working with an existing structure as opposed to starting from scratch. You're also dealing with the inefficiencies of that. So you end up having to build, most often, they're larger because of that fact. Now, most school buildings do not have basements these days, which is why when you're renovating a building, say like the Wheelock School, which was built in the 70s, it doesn't have a basement. So the square footages would be roughly the same. Unfortunately, we're stuck with the building that's here if we're going to be doing an ad reno, and that would mean requiring us to bring the current facility up to code. So that is why, you're right, from a cost per square foot, it is cheaper if you're just looking at cost per square foot, but we don't look at that. We're looking at the total cost of the project. I gave you some time.
No, let him finish. Let him finish. Let him finish.
That's what's on this screen.
It's on
He was going to move to the next one.
No, let him finish this one.
No, it's important, because the first slide that you showed, the language that was on the article. And that language specifically had to do with what was publicized to the community, which means what was in the press release that set the tone for the cost of this project. And those were total construction costs and not total project costs that were in the press release that you paid that PR firm to send.
I didn't pay any.
It was.
I don't
It's not
know.
like you're-
I'm gonna keep moving on. All right, so the other question that came up, and I'm sure Jerry can confirm this, because at our last SBC, I asked, what is it that Dale supports? And Jerry stated that they support demolishing the existing building and building new in its place. And that swing space could be done by selecting or putting the current 4th grade in Wheelock and the current 5th grade into Lake Middle. So we looked at that and we talked a little bit about why that wouldn't be possible. This was the question: during construction, could the Dale Street students be temporarily housed at Wheelock and Middle during the approximate 2 to 3 years it would take to replace or renovate the Dale Street building? So Jeff's going to talk a little bit about this. We just have some numbers for you on how our classrooms work.
That one wasn't working. That one wasn't working.
You can just hold it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it. So yeah, the question came up last SBC that we could just use the swing space in the other 2 buildings and that would work. So I just want to kind of show you how that works in terms of, it's not just taking the kids that the enrollment that we had, 20 years ago and just dividing by the number of classrooms and that works. That's not the way it plays out. So if you look at the 2023-2024 school year, we're looking at the latest NESDEC projections. So we have our own private company that we use every year, twice a year, to get projections for enrollment. So they do one in the beginning of the year for us, and they use the October 1st enrollment. Then they do another one, they do January 1st, February 1st enrollment, so they give us a sense of what it looks like in springtime. We do this so that we can plan for the budget and plan for classrooms for the following year. So we do this every single year. So the most recent numbers are up here. If you look at it, in the 2023-2024 school year, we are projected to have 209 fourth graders. And we'll break that up into 9 classrooms, which ends up being 23.2 kids per classroom. So what we're trying to do, our sweet spot for enrollment is between 18 and 22 for elementary. That's what we try to hit all the time. That's a little bit high, but we could put it in 10 classrooms, but we're going to look at the 9 classrooms at 23.2. Then if you look at the 5th grade, 204 kids, and that's, oh, sorry. And that's 22.6 kids per classroom. So, important thing to remember here is school committee has a policy. We try to stick with that policy in terms of classroom size. We know that that's a really key point for elementary school to keep that classroom size lower. The other thing to remember too is that this projected enrollment from NESDEC is done by kids that are enrolled in actual births living in the town now. So these projections are pretty good in terms of kids that are living in Medfield right now and then kids that are enrolled in our schools right now. We logged during that same year, you're going to have 247 second graders, and we think that 11 classrooms will break that up at 22.5, and then 199 third graders, 9 classrooms at 22.1. Again, we're at the upper level we like. We like 18, 19, 21, but we're at the upper levels here with 22 and 23. But this gives you the framework for the next 2 slides that we got to go over.
Jeff, that second grade, those second grade numbers, that's the incoming kindergarten class, right? So it's going to be a big class?
It's going to be a big class, but the other piece is, and this is kind of what MSBA told us too at the meeting, is that we are one of 3 communities that have the highest kindergarten to birth ratio, which means that many people that move to Medfield move after their kids are born. So other districts, you can project it pretty easily because they live in town, they're born, they come to school. We have a huge turnover. It's Sudbury, Hopkinton, Medfield, the 3 towns that they said that we have the biggest turnover. So we can't predict it definitely because we don't know who's going to move in. And we know it, we see the real estate sign, I think they're, your houses that are for sale for about 3 hours and they're sold. And they bring lots of kids with them, as we've seen. So the existing Wheelock School has 28 classrooms of space. Grades 2 and 3 were 247 second graders, 11 classrooms, 199, 9 classrooms. There's 20 classrooms that are already taken up out of the 28. But then we have specialty classrooms. So we have 4 special education classrooms, 1 art room, 1 music room, and then we have 2 other classrooms. So now we're in a situation, take your pick. So take your pick. Do we have ELL and small group reading instruction happening in one class, or do we have world language in their own class? We need to take a pick here because we're not have enough classrooms for the kids that are coming in. So if we were to add grade 4 to that, which is 209 kids, we would need an additional 9 classrooms. So the point that was made at the SBC meeting is, well, we could fit all these kids in because we did it 20 years ago. Yeah, well, you did it 20 years ago because you might have had 260 or 250, and the classroom sizes were just a lot bigger. There's a finite number of classrooms you can use, and we can't invent more classrooms to put kids in. We actually need 37 classroom spaces to do that plan of having a swing space in 4th grade. Existing blade.
Slow it down a little.
This,
Yeah, too close it'll do.
okay. I can just yell at people here. I have a voice like Chief, so. Yeah. Yeah, probably would. This one.
The question is, does that include, not the specialty classrooms, okay, that's just one to double check that. But that doesn't include
It doesn't include any
services.
specialty classrooms.
That's correct, yes, that's a good point, Leo. Does not include any special classes there, so 37 is really just to, get those 9 classrooms in there, but not that. So it gets a little bit more complicated with Blake. So with Blake, those of you guys students go through there, know that we use a cluster model, we don't use a junior high school model. So a cluster model has clusters of teachers that work together, and they get to know the kids real well, and it's an awesome model for middle school. It's one that's been there for many, many years. So if you look at our 6th grade, we have 3 clusters of 4 teachers, so there's 12 classrooms. 7th and 8th grade, we have 3 clusters of 5 teachers, so that's 15 for 7, 15 to 8. There's 30 classrooms. So then we have specialty classrooms, special ed, art, technology, art, music, reading, ELL, health and wellness. So that's an additional 8 other classrooms. So if we look at it, if we're going to add 204 students, we need 9 other classrooms or 59 classrooms total. We don't have that we just don't have it. So an alternative would be you can go to a junior high school model, go back to the 70s and have a junior high school model, and then we would just reduce staff. So we would have to reduce staff at every single one of these grade levels, 6, 7, and 8, and have them go through a junior high schedule, which is very similar to the high school schedule, which isn't the cluster one that we all come to know and love in Medfield. So that's kind of the implication there, is you reduce staff and run it in the junior high school. Principal Steve Brennan is going to address some of the advantages that we have with Wheelock. So Steve.
That one wasn't working.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody, for coming out today. Thank you, and I just want to especially thank Alex Street that's here, because again, just from somebody in the building working with the teachers every day, they've been very inclusive on designing the building. So I just want to thank them and thank them for giving the time to the teachers to have their input. And again, not just classroom teachers, but special education department, music, everybody. So it's been really great. So from my perspective, looking at the Wheelock site and the advantages, I'd like to start with students first, because everything we do in school should be student-centered. So I think number one, looking at the transitions. I think Dr. Marsden sent out a survey just a couple of years ago asking about the transitions, having whole grades travel through the district together. And again, there was more positives that came out of that than negatives. One thing that we do talk about as an administrative team is looking at, the transitions for any of our kids, special education kids, but especially now with more kids having anxiety. So we looked at that and we said to ourselves, you know what, if we are going to build this school, which we feel like is the best academic institution and it has the space for it, this would be a great spot. The benefit of it would be that there would be less transition and smoother transition. Because already talking with Principal Holly Caulfield at Wheelock, we know that this school, if it's built at this site, will open up a lot of positive opportunities for them to come over and use things like the music room, the outdoor educational space, the gymnasium, so forth and so forth. So if they can go on and get into the school, we're hoping and we think that it's going to be either smoother and less transitions for them to go through. The other thing that we looked at, and we saw more this year than ever before, is the outdoor education and the importance of such. The teachers in the school have done an absolutely amazing job when they couldn't really do what they normally do on a day in and day out basis, and they have utilized the outside fantastically. The space over at the Wheelock opens up a lot more space. One of the things that I really love about it is the architects developed in a walking classroom path out there that the kids can utilize. It's a grant that we wrote a couple years ago. We have 2 classroom sets, and what that is it allows the teacher to do a mini lesson in school and then go outside and follow up that mini lesson with the topic that they do. So it just provides so many extra spaces for them to do that. On top of that, talking to Holly and witnessing myself firsthand, the Victory Garden, and having the students at Wheelock participate in that would now give our students an opportunity to do that. Again, I got to give the teachers at Dale Street a lot of credit. They try to do everything they can to do composting and do things outside the school. They just don't have the space here. That we just don't have that. So again, to put an academic institution over at the Wheelock site would give us that benefit as well. I think the other thing that we looked at is we looked at the opportunity, which we try to do with Dr. Billsborough over at Memorial, and we try to create mentors. The biggest thing that we want coming out of our school are good school citizens. That's most important to us. And one of the things is dealing with adults, as we do often, and also dealing with kids. And I think that having that opportunity for the Dale Street kids, 4th and 5th grade, to have the Wheelock kids over and also to go over to Wheelock to let them know that it's not a big bad school and they'll be able to be okay with that is tremendously important. And they can serve as mentors, and all of us know that looking up to kids is really, really important. I deal with that right now. My twins are playing Babe Ruth 13, 14, 15. If the 15s are good, it makes everything a lot better. So I really would like to see it for that reason. So those are a couple just from the student-centered point, but when you get into the teaching point of it, it's really important too. Now, most curriculums, dealing with 4th, 5th, and 6th grade for a majority of my career, 15 or 18 years as principal, and another 9 as 3rd grade teacher, most of the curriculums are written 3 through 5th grade. A lot of times when you have science and social studies that are more in particular, not to a specific grade, but they're written for 3 through 5, that opens up a tremendous amount of collaboration. Again, I gotta give credit to the teachers that are at the school. They do everything off hours. They call teachers at the Wheelock at night to talk about kids, what can they do, what strategies. They just don't have the time during a typical day to drive over there. To have that collaboration between talking about students and also talking about professional development. A lot of the professional development that we're using right now with project-based learning, there's a lot of great stuff for 2 through 5. So to have that opportunity to run meetings like that would be absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of our staff here, whether it's specialists, I think about music or art, or our OT and PT, which is occupational therapy and physical therapy, go through different buildings. So again, to lessen the travel time, a lot of those skills that they use 2 through 5 are very similar, and to provide an area over there at the new Wheelock site for them to do the skills with the students would be really fantastic. And again, that's not just the 4 or 5 students, that's the people at Wheelock, again, benefiting from that site over there. So really a great amount of possibilities we saw over there. And again, it just was so nice to go through the process, design a school that we felt was going to be best for kids first, and then look at the site of where that would fit. So,
I'm sorry, I'm
No
just
worries.
gonna ask a question.
Sure.
I think you were the gentleman who presented closing arguments at the town meeting. Is that correct? Maybe I'm wrong.
No, no.
But it was twice mentioned about special education.
Sure.
So my question to you is, what's the difference then from Wheelock to Dale Street
Mhm.
regarding extra special ed classrooms, OT, speech and language? And my second question is, are they not getting these services now?
Nope, they're getting the services. It's legally binding, so it's a federal law that they get the services. But what happens is right now, a lot of times where it's OT, PT, I'll stay with that for a second. A lot of the services are very similar with kids that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Not necessarily the same as if they're 5 and 6 years old coming from Memorial. So if they're able, a lot of our OT and PT aren't full-time employees here at the school, they go to different schools. So having an OT, PT space, kind of state of the art, that would be available to our 4 or 5 kids and our 2, 3 kids would be very beneficial for that.
Right, but they will still be getting the same, that child will still be getting the same services if it's 2 times 30 or 2 times 60.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, so
Yeah.
that will not change.
Nope.
And the only thing,
But
and
maybe
I-
it wouldn't be as efficient.
okay, it would be, the child will still receive, it's a federal
Well,
mandate.
of course it
Yeah.
is,
Okay?
but if
And
it's,
I'm
if it's
just-
better for, the teaching staff, the therapists, the OT and PT.
Right.
They would have, more time, if they're not going back and.
Well, they should
forth.
have more time anyway.
Well, they should, but that
Well, I'm
doesn't
just
happen.
explaining how an IEP works. okay?
Yeah, unfortunately, just for your point there, that's something we,
No, I'm
yeah, if I
just
could just
saying.
finish for a second. One of the things we wrestle with education, whether you taught 50 years ago or today, is time and money. I agree with you, you should have more time. We can't create more time. If I could, that would be awesome. I think that the teachers have done great this year, having the kids in the classroom less time, and now we're all back, and we were at the forefront of that, which I'm very proud of how the district handled it. But yes, the kids are gonna get those services, whether it's here at Dale Street, whether it's Wheelock, or whether it's at Hospital Hill, they're gonna get that service.
And I don't doubt that.
Mhm.
Okay, I was just asking that question.
Sure.
Also, don't single them out. Someone mentioned twice about, well, this is great for special ed. You don't use special ed as an argument because they just learn differently. There's part of.
So if I can interrupt you respectfully for 1 second, okay, I have 4 boys of my own, 2 of them on IEP, so I'm not singling them out, and I wasn't the person at town meeting, okay?
I'm
Well,
saying.
just let me finish for 1 second, okay? So as you mentioned, you just heard my remarks over there, played back, special education would be one of the groups that benefits, but if you heard what I said at the beginning, that the most important thing is the transition for all students, even those students without IEPs that have anxiety. So I do agree with you, they shouldn't be singled out, they're not singled out here, we have many of our special education department right over here, and they do an amazing job, especially at a weird age, at like 9 or 10, where they're kind of figuring out if they do have to get pulled. And the teachers here work incredibly hard to make sure that they integrate them in a way where it's not making them feel bad. So I
And
just
that's
want to make
not
sure.
my argument. I am sure they're getting wonderful
Yeah.
special ed services here. I'm just saying, you're using that term as one of the reasons, and it's not a reason.
No, but it is a reason, it is a group that will benefit.
Yes. There is one benefit I can say, that we use that term that actually would be very beneficial. And so as having a child also in IEP, one of the problems is they shift from school to school is the shifting of staff. So you spend 2 years of getting to know a student, and then you have to relearn about that student at the next school. On a campus model, that student would have continuous capability to work with the same staff in a much easier fashion as discussed before. So as I agree with you, they will still get the same services, but the quality of those services can definitely be upped in that process. So they would be able to have that opportunity.
I hear you.
Excellent.
I'm an advocate for the state,
Yeah.
so I'm very passionate about this.
Before I close out, and if there aren't any more questions, we do have the teaching staff here. Does anybody want to add on to anything I said?
Yeah, for special education, it actually is important to bring it up, and we're not trying to single it out, but another reason to think about is that we use a lot of like Wilson reading programs and things that don't usually, that we don't use a lot at the 4 or 5 level. So a lot of our materials that we need for testing students and working with students are at the Weehawken school, and we have to constantly use an inter-office mail. We have someone who comes and like drops off library books and things from Weehawken, right? So if we had the 2 through 5 campus and we were in and out of each other's schools, we'd have better access to materials we need for students who aren't reading or working at 4th and 5th grade level. So that's a huge thing. Again, what you're saying about the staff that can travel with kids from 2 through 5. A lot of the time what happens is like interventions that are happening at Weehawken, the kids come here and there's just not collaboration between the 2 schools. It's a huge thing we need to work on as a staff. And I think we really think it will get better. And we'll be able to use those programs and continue things and not feel this like complete disruption when they come over.
Great. Excellent. And thank you, because the collaboration, again, I know that they're here, and I'm not saying this because they're here, but the celebration I have for the collaboration the teachers did this year in order to take subject areas to make it the best for kids this year was something incredible, and a silver lining of the COVID that we had there, because there were some silver linings in education, something we want to continue. But again, if we can expand that now through 2 through 5, it's only going to be better for our kids. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over, I think it's Mike.
All right, thanks, Dave. So all of that we took into account as a committee, and we had developed a pros and cons list of each of the sites, which you can see here. And this helped inform our decision as we walked through. Vale Street site, clearly some of the pros were closer proximity to downtown, central location, general fondness in the town for the school, has an appeal almost as a neighborhood school, and reuses the existing building. And again, I was comparing only in the ad rental scheme. Cons for this site were a larger school will increase traffic in the downtown area, transition challenges between school sites that Steve touched on. The site is tight. It's about a 17-acre site. And a new school on this site, if it were a new school in the field, would result in a 55% lot coverage, which would basically mean 55% of the site would be building or pavement. The ad rental would probably be down around 40%. The smaller site limits athletic fields and outdoor play space for 2 schools. Obviously, a new facility within the field would eliminate almost all fields for the site. And ad rental would allow us to keep a small soccer field, but not the baseball field that exists there. Teacher collaboration. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. The smaller site also limited parking and on-site vehicular circulation, which would lead to potentially spilling out into the streets for the neighborhood. So parent drop-off, bus traffic could not be contained fully on the site, which would lead to some spillage out into the Dale and Adams locations and potentially North Street, depending on how that was worked out in the morning. Teacher collaboration and shared resources are less sufficient between schools. We recognize that's an existing condition we're trying to improve on. Flexibility is limited due to the small site, limits future expansion for both schools. Obviously, putting a new school in the field would limit any potential to expand Memorial in the future. And then temporary modular classrooms required during construction phasing cause disruptions to students. The modular classrooms would be required for only for an ad rental scheme, and that would be as you renovate, close off a portion of the school, we renovate it, you need to put those kids somewhere. So there would be a small modular classroom set up in the field temporarily while that construction was ongoing. We did get the question about whether we could put them in other schools. We addressed that through Jeff's study previously. And then in terms of phasing during construction, that's again relative to an ad reno scheme. You know, you're obviously shifting kids from classrooms and potentially cafeteria spaces, things like that, and then have to shift as you phase throughout the building. So that's one of the reasons an ad reno scheme would be probably about a year longer. It would be about 3 years instead of 2 years. And then the last con on this list was more difficult and more expensive to achieve a highly energy efficient building. Again, that was relative to an ad reno scheme. A new building would be equivalent on both sites, but an ad reno scheme would not likely reach the goals that the town has given us in terms of achieving a net zero building. For the Wheelock site, the pros, obviously, new upper elementary campus has the space to be able to utilize outdoor space and fields. Adjacency of grades 2 to 5 will reduce the number of significant transitions between school sites. This would also eliminate just to note, one bus drop-off location. Currently, our elementary buses go to all 3 schools. In the proposed scenario, there would be 2 locations. There would be 1 location for both the Wheelock and Dale, and then Memorial, so that we'd be able to eliminate one of the bus drop-off locations. Large site with substantial space around athletic fields will remain with space for the new field. Ample parking and good site circulation for schools and community events. Again, that site allows us to keep all bus circulation and all parent drop-off on the site through bus drop-off loops.
Just a quick comment based on what she said.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, and she had not mentioned that if by chance the traffic became crazy and it was staggered, then you potentially would be dropping off that same city twice a week.
I don't believe the intention was to have the bus drop off at 2 different times.
Well, if you stagger it, to your comment earlier.
Yeah, no, what I was saying is just looking at the times of drop off, the buses may be a different window. So a lot of schools, and I believe the school now currently utilizes a bus and then parent staggered drop off. So the buses come in all at once and the parents are allotted either a time before or after bus drop off. So it would really be just about when the parents come in.
It's staggered, the staggered bus versus parent release. This is done at a lot of schools where basically they don't want them both coming all at once. So they may release the buses first and then the parent drop off. There's a lot of subsequent to that. All right, so teacher collaboration, shared resources, Steve touched on greater flexibility for future expansion. This would allow, again, for the potential future expansion or replacement of Wheelock, as well as potential expansion of this school, potentially if need be. Minimal disruption to students, no temporary modulars. Again, that's compared to the ad reno, and no phasing premium compared to the ad reno. A new building on either site would be equivalent in terms of construction. And then ease of construction, sufficient space for contractor activities. There is a little bit more space, a lot more space. Wheelock actually has about 48 acres, but there is more space for the construction laydown area, things like that. So we don't have, it could still be built here, but it would be a tighter site if it's in the field, just in terms of making sure we have space for construction activities, but not impossible.
Can I ask a clarification? You said 48 acres. The filing with MSBA had it 44 acres of the entire, which include both the Wheelock School and the soccer fields?
It's one site.
Look, can I finish? The area that the building is on, the physical building, how many acres is the 98,000 square foot building?
It's approximately 4 acres.
So the building is 4 acres?
Yep, the building, the actual, we talked about lot coverage previously. This is something that we do when designing schools, is we have to look at the overall lot coverage of building square footage and paved area. So I had mentioned the lot coverage for Dale as being either about 55% with a new school building, or I believe in the 40s for an ad reno. For the Wheelock location, if a new school is built there, it would be 22%.
How does that compare? I know it's 63,000 square feet for the current Dale. That 4 acre building, if it was reconfigured in that spot, how much of Dale would be cover. It isn't the 17 acres. And
I'm not understanding the question. Can you clarify?
a new construction here does not take the field.
The options we looked at was a new construction on the field. We originally had looked at doing a new construction in this location, and we received feedback from the community that there was not a desire to demo this building.
Can I just clarify? It's selective of what feedback from the community, because 38% of the community wanted it here, 25% wanted it at Wheelock. So it seems that there's a little bit of picking and choosing what feedback from the community comes in. If a proposal had been made with, just as Dr. Marsden actually pointed out in Norwood, where they kept the facade of the building, but they had new construction, that project would be cheaper and would still be the same 98,000 square feet. Is that correct?
We don't know that it would be cheaper.
It's not gonna be cheap.
Well, it's new construction.
You're just guessing at that, Chair.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that the new construction that you sent to the MSBA showed that it's 590 per square feet versus 630 for Wheelock. I'm not guessing.
But that did not include, let's be clear, that did not include demoing the entire facility with the exception of the facade. It included reusing the structure.
98,000 square foot building here, 98,000 square foot building there. Let's call them the same price. Okay, brand new.
No, I'm saying, don't keep the facade,
Okay.
build a new facade.
Okay, Norwood.
I'm saying brand new construction that just used the design to keep it.
And it's 98,000 square foot here, 98,000 square foot there. You agree? Just say it's the exact same
I
building.
agree. One is 590, one is
This
630.
one you have to demo. That's more expensive.
No, that is included in the 590. That is the site work it is.
That was not included in the 590 for the new school in the field.
What you filed with MSBA said all in the site work included for this site on new construction.
Did not include demolition of this building. That's why it was an alternate, which was on that list, because we hadn't decided whether we were demoing this building or not. When we looked at the two options for the site, we had a partial demo as one of those options, and we had a full demo of this building. Those were done as alternates, as it was on both sites, and that's why those numbers are not included in the 590 that you referred to.
The new construction for this site option that was presented, how would you do new construction without demolition?
Build it in the field. Those were the options that we evaluated. Yep, I'll show you. Yep. I'm gonna skip ahead. All right. All right, so just to recap, when we looked at alternatives, we looked at the addition renovation, right, which kept the existing structure, which you see here, and added on the necessary square footage that was needed to meet the requirements. This additional parking was added as necessary for the project, which again meant losing the baseball field here. That was the addition renovation option that Jerry's referring to, and that on a cost per square foot basis was $560 per square foot because we were able to preserve this structure. But that resulted with a project cost of about $80 million. Second options we looked at was doing and there's a couple of these, but putting a new school in the field between the two schools, and then looking at either keeping the Dale Street structure here or demoing it. And the demo again was only included as an alternate at this time.
Is that the whole Dale Street, or is that only part of it? We taking part of the old?
That's correct. So there was demolition for the gym, but that also was only included as an alternate at the time. And I'll point out those numbers back on the cost slide. And then the third was over at the Wheelock site, comparing the new school with the existing Wheelock school. And those are the three. There were two others, right? There was another a different version of this that had a bit different configuration, and there was a different version of Wheelock that had a different configuration.
This one was preserve the one drop off, the middle one, I think. I don't think we preserved.
Sorry, what?
One of them was to preserve the single drop off of buses, but it required doubling everything back here.
Which option?
One of them was, I think. We were trying to preserve like we did at Wheelock, the double drop off. Yeah.
In terms of doing a single drop off
Yeah.
between, that was that was before we narrowed it down, right? When we couldn't really find a way to make that work.
But we were taking those into consideration.
We did.
Preserve those levels without having to have 3 stops. Because right now, every elementary kid goes to every elementary school for a normal year. And so even if you're a kindergartner or a first grader, if you get on the bus, you can get a full tour of all 3 elementaries before you actually get to school. So they spend 30 minutes on the bus before they actually get to the school. So if you eliminate one of those, you're drastically cutting off.
I'm going to agree. I just want to go back to the cost slide. So again, we're being completely open about what was priced. Okay. Back again, here are our main options. Add reno at Dale, 80.4 million. New builds, 2 options, just around 72 million each. New builds at Wheelock, 76 to 77 million each, and I'll explain to you why Wheelock is more expensive in a minute. Okay, here are our alternates. These are not in the base numbers that Jerry is quoting. Demolition, part of the 1941 building, the classroom wing, that was 1.4 million. Demo full Dale building, 1.8 million. Replacing the field, if we chose to build in the field, replacing the baseball field somewhere else in
So
town.
Mike, we just got, there are a lot of numbers I just want to clarify. So the 1.8 million demolition
Is the entire,
would be the entire site. So new construction would still be significantly less here with the 1.8.
I'd have to run the numbers, but so yeah, it would add approximately, I mean, if it's adding 2 million to the new construction, it would be about 74 million, give or take, project cost.
And then the Wheelock new construction is
77.
okay. So it is cheaper to do it.
Yep.
Okay.
So let me take this, go ahead.
Say something. I happen to be a senior, and I think Wheelock works better. And I have to leave, so I'm sorry to interrupt. But what we're not hearing in the future costs is that by being able to share some staff with the buildings together, there will be savings in the future. So you may have a little bit more now, but you're going to save going down.
Well, just because.
Let her finish, please.
And
It's okay, take a breath.
And the cost, the school isn't costing us our taxes. If you've gone to the town meetings or been to any of the select board meetings, we've learned through the years that the state is giving us less and less money. And that's where most of the costs are coming in. So please don't be scared by these tactics that it's going to cost you more money. If you listen to the kids that are going to be coming here, they all want the new school. Why don't you listen to the children and the teachers? You have professionals here. You have selecting, you have a school board committee. They have consultants. Don't let yourselves be hijacked. And that's what's happening here. And I'm very sorry that I have to go, but I couldn't get to speak at the town meeting because we were,
We'll be having more, so there'll be other opportunities, so thank you for coming.
Trying to convince the 17 votes we needed to make it happen. We wouldn't be here.
So, I'm running over on this portion. I really do want to hear more feedback, but I do want to say, because it has come up, I want to explain exactly why the Wheelock site is more expensive. It's not just throwing money in, right? We're not just saying, all right, we're going to take an extra 3 million and we're just not going to do anything with it. It's investment. And what is it an investment in? The major piece of that is actually addressing the drop-off loop and parking for the existing Wheelock school. This is something that is on our capital maintenance projections anyway. We're going to have to do that one way or the other. We're proposing to do it as part of this project. That's about 2 million of that overage. And so that would, again, bring the current parking, all of that space up to current codes, inclusive of meeting Mass DEP standards for stormwater runoff. And all of that would work better because we would then have a single bus drop-off loop for the 2 schools and parking for both, adequate parking for both schools. So it's not just money that's being thrown away. This is an investment in infrastructure. It's addressing a need on the Wheelock site already. So that explains about 2 million. Another $1 million has to do with a water line. There's a water line that would need to be replaced and upsized from a 6-inch to an 8-inch. That's about $1 million. So we recognize that that is the difference, a difference between Dale and Wheelock. The other thing is traffic mitigation. We're carrying a worst case scenario, right? We have to make sure that we do traffic mitigation. We recognize that there'll be increased traffic in the neighborhood, and we're doing something about it. We've worked with our traffic engineer. We think we can get away with basically creating a 3-way stop sign at South and Elm, so that traffic would be stopped in all directions at South and Elm. The traffic, the street would be repainted such that it would be a left turn and a right turn only lane from Elm Street, so that you could have people moving in both directions. but traffic would be stopped to make sure that traffic from Elm can get out. So that is the current thinking, and then but we're carrying enough that if we had to do a traffic light at that location to ease traffic for the drop off and the pickup and drop off times, let's make sure we're being clear about this. This is only during pickup and drop off times. This isn't something that's going to be throughout the entire day.
And Mike, something like the cost of, obviously, like to do it here, you're gonna need modulars, you're gonna need a whole other
Sorting out around now.
schooling scenario for the kids.
Yeah.
That would all be incremental costs that aren't contemplated with $3 million to do sites. Is that true?
That's correct. So, and then, the other option that's come up that wasn't part of our original study was demoing this building and building a new one in its current place, which would of course mean we would need to replace enough space to house all of the 4th and 5th graders for the span of about 3 years.
As you guys have done that, like, do you have an ballpark idea? I'm assuming.
Well, I can tell you because when we looked at part of the base repair option is if we're repairing this, that was up at $3.5 million for modulars. So that number's right there. Okay. So that's just for the base repair, which means it's probably more than that if we're doing modulars for a 3-year period for an entire school, since we don't have swing space elsewhere in town.
Mike, in the traffic study, was there an intermediate area versus a traffic light or just freeway stop? Maybe this is for Chief Grant, put an officer at the corner? Was that factored into the study?
No,
I
don't know that that's.
Drop off and pickup times?
I don't think that's something that generally we want to be in that place. We want to make sure that it's something that's efficient. I know there's definitely plan to have crossing guards at the school site, but in terms of at South and Elm, I don't think there was any. We didn't evaluate that as an option. I don't know that you probably don't want that option, but.
So just based on emergency needs, we never want to have our officers, well, for emergency and safety needs, we never want them to be in a designated location where they're locked in. So that if the town had some type of emergency that required police response, we would have to make a very dangerous decision on whether we leave traffic to itself or pedestrian crossing. We did talk about the addition of additional crossing guards to help some of the bikers and walkers get to Wheelock School safely. But we are looking at basically traffic devices or alternate traffic plans to mitigate some of the issues.
We have to put a traffic light down where South and 27.
I know South and Elm has been a talk on
Well,
traffic light there.
As the worst case scenario.
The other end of it where it comes into 27.
South and 27 is something I know that was proposed by Chief Meany previously, but there was a study done and then the town said we don't want it or something. I forget what it is. Mike, do you remember the history on that?
Yeah, I think when we looked at it, the 27 West Street was a higher priority.
But assuming the school goes forward over in that area, that would seem to increase the need.
It's certainly an option for us to look at. I think, it's a very expensive option, and with every plus is pro as a con. So when we talk about back-to-back lighting there, as we see on 109 downtown, that can create some significant delays as well. So our initial thoughts were either on stop signs, we do have to consider that the railroad tracks are right there, and doing some single turn lanes. So basically, where during short periods of time when school is coming or going, we direct traffic to basically funnel the traffic out of one general area, so we don't have those backups. But a lot of that has to be fluid in the sense that we have to see what the uptick in volume is and then make adjustments once we recognize the volume.
I'm going to take one more question and then I'm going to get back into this because I want to get through one more thing and make sure we have time for more questions and input. But I'm sorry, the gentleman behind you has been waiting to ask a question.
First of all, thank you. I know how much time it is in this committee, so we've done this. My only question was, do you guys consider an option where you do a full new build, to Memorial, and then flip sending the kindergarten and the first grade to Wheelock, and then bringing them over there for one master site connected? And this is my first meeting, so I don't know.
No. So that has come up, and there's a difference in that the requirements by DC, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, for specifically pre-K 1 now requires, we actually don't even have it at Memorial. It requires a bathroom within the classroom. So if we were to consider moving Memorial to another school, it would have to meet those standards. which Wheelock does not either. So it would basically require us upgrading it. So that's the reason why we can't move kindergartners into a new school, because it would have to be brought up to current guidelines. And that would get much more expensive.
It's been a while since I went to Wheelock, but doesn't it still, do Wheelock have bathrooms in between each of the classrooms for staff?
No.
Do that, do.
For staff,
It was the old kindergarten room when they built that originally, so that the ones that are in the bar back on the first and second floor, they do, but all the others do not.
And so, but they would need to have like kindergarten sized toilets and not adult toilets, that type of thing, so.
So then when they build the new memorial, will that be over at the Wheelock site too?
I don't know about a new memorial, I won't be here for that.
This question was done, if we don't meet those standards today, couldn't we apply for a waiver for that too, since it's existing structure?
I don't know that there would be a problem, but
It might bring problems,
It might.
I'm not sure,
I don't know.
I don't know. Have to look with them, check with them.
Mike, just a quick yes or no. Are you guys open to a new traffic study now that everyone's starting to commute back to Boston and no one's just working from home? Just to get a feel for the flow, because South Street going down to South Extension gets ugly just because you have to stop, right? That's a given going up and down. So I'm just asking, is any way that you'd be open to that? If you go to next September, school got going, fully open, no more Zooms, no more nothing. Then we get the reality of what the real traffic pattern is.
I'm absolutely open to it. I don't have any money to pay for it.
Why?
Because we basically have spent or committed every dollar that we have for this feasibility study. Was that, we have, but we've already done that. Oh, correct. If, thanks, Tim. If this project gets approved by the town, there will be money to be spent further on traffic studies. But I don't have the funds currently to do traffic studies at both sites right now and evaluate further based on current information. What we did is we did the best we could by taking the existing counts that we had and basically comparing. So let's say pre-COVID, we had the numbers from Mass DOT on what pre-COVID numbers were on 109 and 27, and then we factored it up. So if those numbers pre-COVID were, say, 1,500 cars and post-COVID were 1,200 cars, we saw that ratio and said, all right, well, if we go back to 1,500, it's going to be up by 25%, right? And then so every other item that we looked at was factored up by that same percentage. So unfortunately, we couldn't change COVID. We had to do the best we could with the information that we had.
I think, Mike, just a general point, I think we acknowledge that wherever you put the building, it's going to be worse traffic than wherever you put the building is.
Correct.
So,
Why is it gonna get worse here? Because if you just renovate and build here and you end up keeping the structures the same, it's a 2-year period where I know people survived when they did renovations to Blake Mill, they survived when they did renovations to Wheelock. 2 years isn't much when you're looking at a 70-year build. So that's one of my concerns, is that I see what South Street looks like now, and it was done during COVID. That's just, it's really not.
My quick question on the traffic study. The one thing about that traffic, that freeway stop is only during school hours?
Correct. Well, no, the three-way stop wouldn't. But if we did a traffic light, it would only be really functioning as a traffic light during school drop-off hours, and it would be a blinking yellow, blinking red during other times of the day. So I do want to get through the schedule scenarios, and then I'm going to skip through. All right, so these are the 3 schedules that we looked at our last SBC meeting. The first one is the one we were on. The second one is the one that we're sort of on now, where we looked at, we postponed the submission of the schematic design to allow for more discussion with the community. And so that currently would have us submitting to the MSBA for their October board, and then potentially a November town meeting and ballot. And then that would, if that gets approved in November, that would end up with a school opening in September of 2024. The alternative would be if the town chose to reevaluate, we would have to request the MSBA to withdraw our preferred schematic. We would have to redo a preferred schematic. That process we estimate would take about 12 to 15 months. And so we're basically looking at a 1-year delay in terms of, so that would be an opening of the school in September of 2025. Due to that, because as we talked about, time is money, there's a couple of things. A new feasibility study, this says $1 million, it's probably less than that because we have done some work that we could carry over. So I've always been saying sort of 750,000, and we can revise this slide, but let's just say it's 750,000. And a 1-year delay in terms of, I'm sure you've all been seeing the news about inflation. Unfortunately, we're in a time of hyperinflation right now, and costs are going up. That's always been the case in construction. We have been carrying about 4% a year. It's right now, it's higher than that, but we're carrying 4% for the sake of this discussion. That would add approximately another 2.3 million to the cost of the project. So just a quick run through the existing design, and then I'm gonna open it up for questions, comments. This is sort of a little bit older site plan, but we do bus drop-off loop that would be able to contain all of the buses. Parents would be dropping off here for the new school, new parent drop-off for the existing New Lock school here, new elementary school located behind it, new soccer field, and new parking for the new school there. This will be an entry view of the new school, courtyards in between the new school and relock. Courtyard on the opposite side for play area and recess. Oops, sorry, I skipped over one. This is an aerial view showing the existing Wheelock School. Elm Street sits behind it, tucked away. New photovoltaic panels you'll see on the roof. Play area, basketball court, parking.
Where in that is the soccer lacrosse field that is where the school would be?
The existing soccer lacrosse field is right here. This is exactly where the building is being placed.
Right, so where are you relocating it to?
So that's relocated here. Sort of adjacent to kind of where the Connex box is now, the storage box.
That's where all the dog walkers, all the trees there.
Yeah, whoops, sorry, wrong button. So the existing access road, which you walk in onto the fields, goes down through here and wraps around and connects right about here, and then runs along the railroad tracks.
That's the road that goes down to the wells.
Correct, correct, just for a frame of reference. And then there's some existing paths here that are kept and preserved that connect you over to the Holmquist land, which I know many of you know and walk. This is the existing softball field over here that would remain in place. The secondary softball field, the main softball field is off to this side, and then the existing playground. Right now we have MAP being preserved in its place, and we've started a discussion with them about how they might be able to utilize the new building. And then one more slide. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over this one. But this is just viewing from the other angle. Again, main softball field, existing practice softball field. This is the existing soccer field that gets replaced over here. And as well, this does reconnect the access road back to the well, so that would still remain in place. And this is the existing tree line. So currently there's just a little bit of cutback here, which we're going to try to minimize, but the existing tree line remains the same. So what gets cut out is that row of trees that separates the two fields right now, which unfortunately have been damaged by the last few storms. All right, so
Mike, can you put the timeline for a second? Like, like theoretically, if the town would have to fund the new monies for the feasibility study or not?
yes, that would be entirely funded by the town. So we would have to have a special town meeting to approve the funds before we could start any new reevaluation. And that would also, we would have to make sure the MSBA would allow us the time to do that.
So it doesn't have to wait till next town meeting next June?
We would, I imagine if the town wanted to pursue this, then the town would do that. We'd have to set a special town meeting as soon as possible. I don't know what that time frame would look like, but it would have to be as soon as possible to get that started to minimize any delay.
Does the MSBA budget, like, does that change over the period? So if we elect for a more expensive option, do they change what they're granting us? And then if you're reapplying for that period 1 year hence, do you potentially get more money, or is it?
No. Unfortunately, once you're in, basically been assigned our percentage, our reimbursement rate. That's not going to change. What does change is how, because there's all sorts of, it gets very complex about calculations and what's included and what's excluded. So there's our reimbursement rate, which is 39.4%. But when it all shakes out at the bottom, we're probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30% or 25%, somewhere between there as our effective rate. Because they cap site costs at 8%, they cap building cost per square foot at $333. So it gets kind of complicated as to what's included and what's excluded because they have a lot of qualifications. I'm sorry?
Inflation should get counted, right?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Inflation should get counted then, if it's like.
It should, but that's, every now and then they reassess, but when I say every now and then, I mean like every, 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
They do change.
But Mike, just.
Right, they change the reimbursement rates occasionally as well.
But Medfield's not changing that dynamically, but it's gonna change.
Right.
It gets
As Lynn noted, it gets locked in at the project funding agreement, which is a milestone. But what I can tell you is our reimbursement rate is not likely to go up. Put it that way, because Medfield's a fairly affluent community compared to some other towns, and I've seen some of the other rates with some of our clients that we work with, and they have much more favorable rates than we do.
Another one you delayed, I mean, that's the best case, right? Because if MSBA decides to take their time, or there's another delay, or something happens, like, then you're looking at 2 years. Like, there's no, like, 1 year would be great, but it's optimistic.
Yeah, correct, that would be, in my mind, that would be the minimum.
Mike, can you talk a little more about the use of current Dale School? I mean, I know you talked about Parks and Rec. There are two things I'm most interested in. One is, my recollection is when Parks and Rec first came to Warren Committee a couple of years ago about a new building, they were talking probably $10 million. I'm guessing it would be substantially less.
I know they had looked at a new building up at Hospital Hill that was about $20 million.
Right, but here I'm guessing would be significantly less than like.
That's what we're evaluating now. What we're looking at is what is the absolute minimum cost that we would have to spend to move Parks and Rec into this building, which is more than they need, but it's still an upgrade from what they have currently. The FAF Center building is in worse shape, unfortunately, than this building.
I need to clarify that, because when I was head of Parks and Rec during that whole thing, I've said it many times at town meeting, it was nowhere to me. We were looking at it, I think it was 3.6 to maybe 4 something. It was not a high-end building.
I don't know what time frame you're looking to, but right, this is more recent
Okay,
than
I'm just
that.
saying, we used to when it was McCarthy, that's
Yep.
where the first go was.
Yep. No, this isn't the McCarthy option. This was a recent one that they had done a couple of years ago to put a new building up at the Sledding Hill. And it came in about $21 million, I believe, I can send you the report because it woke me up, that this is too much. So, I still believe that Parks and Rec belongs here in the center of town. That's where a lot of their constituency is, and I think it makes sense to utilize this building for other town needs without building that building out
Like
there.
that, and my second thing I'd like you to talk about is the difficulties in having a set plan for this building at this time.
It's challenging, certainly, to be able to do all of that before the town meeting. We're working on it, but there's a lot of people who have strong opinions about what this building should become, should we choose to vacate it. So there are other things, there's other town needs that we're have to evaluate. So those are all part of the process. Most of that, at the very least, we've taken it up with the permanent building committee, of which some members are part of this committee, or all members are part of this committee, but that is a separate committee as
It's not
well.
that we haven't thought about it.
Correct, it's not that we have not thought about it.
Do you have a timeline on when you'll have those numbers available? Because I think that's a huge important point when we're thinking about like forging ahead at Wheelock. We're gonna have these 2 abandoned buildings. No one's really talking about or considering that. So, I mean, I guess.
I'm sorry, 2 abandoned buildings?
Well, the FAP Center, are they?
Oh.
Yeah, and
No, so, I mean, if we moved Parks and Rec over here, we would most likely either
But the
demo that
cost to
or.
renovate this, to bring it up to code, to have parks and events here, that's a huge cost as well, and a time.
Right, well, the Park and Rec issue isn't going away regardless. If we do a data building here for the school, we still have to address Parks and Rec, one way or the other. It's all part of the overall.
Included within the proposal of the Dale Street School or
No.
It has not.
No, that's
So,
correct.
but I just think that's a really important point when we're thinking about Wheelock. There's a huge
financial consideration and time consideration of these buildings in the middle of town. And we're just, I haven't heard much about it, so. Will we know more about it?
You think about it, what we'd be committing to, we'd be committing to demolishing these buildings. At a minimum.
What's the
move
cost
out of
associated?
here. We have the-
For this building? This building was 1.8 to demolish, to abating demolish.
No, in terms of like, what's your actual liability, right? If it costs $20 million to turn this into a Parks and Rec building, we're not gonna do it, right? So what we're committed to is you gotta do something with it. So you're committed to mothball and you have to demolish it. To give a fixed liability, it's up to 1.8 million if you demolish it. What happens to Parks and Rec depends on what happens to the FAF Center, how long it lasts. And then whether the town wants to have a Parks and Rec building. The town may just decide it's too much, we're not gonna have one. But whatever we do at the school, you know, if the FAF Center roof falls in tomorrow, we're probably not putting a lot of money into the parent, right? So.
Why hasn't it been considered to incorporate Parks and Recs into a building?
Because the MSBA won't allow that.
They won't allow
Mike, can we ask about that?
I think economies of scale though in doing that kind of building, keeping that out of the school of mass reimbursement, but economies of scale with building supplies and building a
There's a
park
lot of
and
other
recreation
towns
onto
do
the
that.
side. When you go to other towns and
One
other
other town.
states, and they even have things like their senior center is part of their high school, so that you get, you know, work like that. And frankly, I'm thinking that the poor kids at first and kindergarten are gonna be completely ignored now if the fifth graders who used to read and write stories with them are shipped off to relock. I mean, I don't understand. Dan.
I'm a fifth grade teacher, we don't do that.
Yeah.
That's too bad. It doesn't, it used to be a favorite program.
So, this is the teachers and the students, it doesn't happen anymore. So whatever happened back then.
So it's been brought up about doing a combined facility with another program. If we do that, we are losing the MSBA's reimbursement. So if we're doing, let me finish, Jerry. If we are doing that, we're losing the $18 million as their participation in that program. Now, that allows us more flexibility, but we're going to lose their participation. They won't participate in a hybrid combined Parks and Rec facility and school.
Mike, do you have that in writing from them? Can you get that in writing from them?
Why won't
We
they?
can certainly
Well, number one, but number two, the bigger question was, if,
that's terrible.
On this point, we've raised this question a couple of times. This building is being built for 575 students. Based on the fall enrollment, the number that would be here first year is 370 students.
You mean in 2024?
When this opens, if you look at K1, K,
I don't have the numbers in front
well,
of
I
me.
have all numbers and I've sent them to you, so, and I've also published
I know what the
them.
open
So,
Believe that, I learned a long time ago to quote numbers.
okay, that's fine, but it's less than 400, which means, I mean, we're at 400 now, we were 3,100 in 2005, we're at 2,500 students in the district now. We had 500 students at Dale in 2005, we have 400-ish right now. So the day that building opens, there is a lot of excess capacity because we are building it larger for the next 50 years, which means
Correct.
even without asking MSBA to make it a multi-purpose building, that building is empty at night and in summers, which it could
Not
easily.
some, there are some programs.
Okay, let's go with it. Take 5 classrooms from that. You have a huge building in the center of town that is going to be larger than it is needed initially, correct? And we're not asking MSBA to change anything about the school building we're proposing. We're just saying when, and they allow this, when the building is built, you can use it for other things. Have we done an analysis of that?
Do you
Because that's
have,
what
do you
we've
have
asked
that in
for.
writing that the MSBA will allow us to use it for other things?
Absolutely. They encourage it. It's part of what they,
No, as far as a permanent, putting a permanent program.
as long, I sent documents to the selectmen and you, Mike, that went through community use of buildings that are.
Yeah, for programs like after-school programs.
No,
Absolutely.
other programs for the community, and it's done in lots of other towns.
Correct.
Given what's happening when we're gonna spend $80 million for a building, it's just a simple, common sense request that what we get is the quick answer, MSBA won't reimburse. We're not asking to do some kind of, in fact, it was brought up by all 3 selectmen in the meeting, which we sent the video around asking that very question. If the gym is empty, after school and in summers, of course that could be used for other programming that are in town.
It can.
So what we've asked for, and since we're in the question and answer period, what we originally asked for and I asked at the school building committee is that we would be able to, on the Dale side, for everyone to hear both sides of it evenly, right? That as you talked about something, we could address it, and we were told we could ask questions at the end.
No, what we said was, we hold a public forum for the entire town. We don't
Right,
hold,
and I
let me
asked-
finish. We don't hold a public forum just for you
I
and
did
just
say-
for Dale Dale.
No.
We invited, no, you asked for us to specifically do a forum just for Dale Dale.
No, I asked for us to be able to present equally, and it could absolutely.
And you
be
can hold your own forum to do that.
Can I ask a question on
What we
the
asked
process?
for was a public setting to have the discussion.
I just have a question on the process. It's an antagonistic discussion that's not gonna really move us forward, I feel like. Are we done and decided that it will be at Wheelock and this is a formality, or is there actually a process we can go forward?
We voted in the fall, the SBC voted in the fall to recommend the preferred schematic, which is the Wheelock option. The Board of Selectmen then asked us to do additional community forums, which we did. And then they voted to support that decision.
So the school committee.
School committee, for that, Jess,
We voted before the
before the SBC.
Right, but so then in terms of the town discussion.
So ultimately, that's why we submitted to the MSBA this preferred option, okay? And then petition came before the town asking us to readdress this based on those 5 bullet points that we talked about. And that's what we were looking at, is why, those weren't new information. Those were all things that we had in the fall when we made our decision. Ultimately, we will eventually need to vote and decide whether we want to go with that second alternative schedule, the third alternative schedule, which would mean we need to go back to the town and ask for feasibility study funds, and we need to ask the MSBA for an extension and to withdraw our first schematic. Ultimately, we as a body have not voted on that. The Board of Selectmen have not voted on that. The school committee have not voted on that. Actually, excuse me, the petition was only to the SBC and the school committee, not to the Board of Selectmen. So ultimately, we will need to vote on that, whether we decide to accept it. It's a non-binding petition. We're not required to accept it. We have to decide whether we choose to or not.
Yeah, I just want to say, it seems, you know, it's great that we're all getting together and stating our opinions, but most of the people that have done the work here, it's not like, oh, they've just done it in a month or in 2 months. This has been going on for years. Years, hundreds and hundreds of hours of most of these people being volunteers. And I think we all agree that they want the best interest for the town. I don't think that there's some, you know, manipulative, like, oh, let's get over at Wheelock because I don't know why. So, you know, they're, you know, showing us that they've looked at all of this stuff extensively. And I think it's really easy now to jump in like at the 11th hour and be the armchair quarterback. And say, I understand that you feel something different. But there's many people that don't feel, no, I'm still talking. Chris, I am still talking. You're Chris.
Let her finish.
Because this is my opinion, okay, doesn't make it wrong. Just because you have your opinion doesn't make you right.
Okay, okay. So I just want to explain, talk about this process, okay? Because how many meetings have you attended, Tracy?
Tell me how you think it's gone, Chris.
How many meetings have you attended? Just for reference.
I don't.
Okay, so I've attended these meetings, every single one of these meetings for the past year and a half. And including warrant committee meetings, school committee meetings. Have you seen me here, Mike?
Absolutely.
Right, I've been at every single.
I'd be lost without you.
So, and what was, and I will ask, what was my number one question at all the face-to-face meetings that I attended?
I wouldn't even speculate.
I joked about it with Lynn at the meetings. I said, of course, you know what my question's gonna be before I ask it. And the joke was, when is the information gonna be on the website? When is the community gonna find out about this information? Because I did not have an opinion about how this project was gonna proceed. All I cared about was making sure that our community was aware of the key decision-making points along this process. And as this process proceeded, point by point, I got worried that our teachers were not involved in decision-making early on in this process. They weren't. You were excluded from this process. There was a subcommittee.
Wait a minute.
You were only interrupted me.
All right, hold on. Let's try to keep some order. Thank you.
In January 2020, okay, I was at an SBC meeting very early in the morning and also at a school committee meeting where there was a subcommittee that was voted on that was going to be formed of educators. Okay, there's probably about a dozen people. Okay, Holly Caulfield, the Wheelock principal, was not included on that subcommittee. There was a whole list of names.
That subcommittee was not, eventually it was not used. That doesn't mean the teachers weren't involved in the design process.
Well, wait, let me finish. So what I'm saying is that that subcommittee never met, okay?
Correct.
It was voted on, it was formed in January 2020.
Correct.
And it never met.
Correct.
Okay. So my question is, when did the Dale Street,
Love to answer this.
when did the Dale Street teachers, okay, would like to know there were teachers here during the envisioning sessions. I know there were probably half a dozen teachers that were here.
So that's not involvement?
They're the same, I can name the teachers by name because they're typically the same ones that are involved with all these types of task forces over and over and over again. So what I'm saying is that the teacher involvement, I asked for thought exchange feedback. I asked for public record requests on survey data. I have a whole list of teacher feedback.
Do you have a question?
It's never been incorporated.
Chris, I know you brought that up at town meeting, I appreciate it, thank you, gentlemen, thank you again. We decided after that group was made up, that we didn't need to. One of the great things that we have with Arrow Street is they have an educator who works with the educators directly during the school day. So that was one of the strong points for Arrow Street. So we decided we didn't need to have that other group. We didn't have more meetings, when Emily was going to be on site numerous times, meeting with all those teachers. That's why. No, Chris. It made no sense. It made no sense.
Wait. He didn't interrupt you. Let him finish.
At what point in the process did that happen? At what point?
The whole process.
I mean, that was part of the deal that we had with Arrow Street. They would have an educator on staff to work with our teachers, and they did. So there was no need to have a meeting that wasn't needed. We had someone working with the teacher during the school day. It wasn't needed, Chris. Chris, it wasn't needed.
Were our teachers involved with the decision of site selection before the SBC?
Okay.
Or did they get engaged after the fact to help with the design?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Hold on.
So actually, it's not really significant because if, I don't know one teacher wearing blue or anywhere that would want to work in an environment where they have to switch classrooms through mid-year, go to modulars, who would want to do that, Chris?
You don't
Who would want to do that?
let the teachers speak for themselves.
Who would want to do that?
That's a great point. I would love one of the teachers to come up and speak about their thoughts on it.
Why would I have any expertise in knowing where a building should be built? Well, I trust all the committees that did the site testing. I've been at our committee meetings since before we even knew it was a 4-5 school. We were still talking 3-4-5. Since before we knew where it was going to be on Wheelock campus. We have been meeting. We would come at night. We had all those meetings at night. It was like 2.5 years ago.
Can I ask you a
3
question?
years ago. Yes.
Were you coerced into that?
So Mike, can I ask a question?
You've had your airtime, Martha in the back.
I came here because I wanted to hear information, because I think at town meeting, we talked about getting more information out. So I sort of assumed that people would come here and listen to each other, rather than come in here with an opinion and try to propose something. So what we decided at town meeting is that we needed more time for people to come and see what the information was, because they didn't have that in the past. Can we stop talking about the past and look at the data and try to come to consensus? Because we would have a lot of smart, caring people in this room. And we're spending a lot of time pointing fingers rather than moving forward and trying to find out, make sure we all have the information. We're not all going to agree in the end, but unless we can make a constant or informational comment.
Thank you. Phil?
I agree with that, and, you know, I wanted to share some thoughts at town meeting, and we ran out of time, because I think I have to do a bunch of people, but, like, as I sit here today, like, first off, like, I've only been in town 7 years, so I don't have a lot of history, I didn't go to any school, so there's a little bit that I came into, I didn't have a dog in the fight, right? But one of the things I've come to appreciate the town is we have people who dedicate their time and talents, and right, like, as far as I know, like, nobody up here is getting paid, right? Like, no, but I mean, no, also, like, if you had to put together, right, you guys build schools for a living.
Some of us do, yes.
Okay. And if you had to put a price on the value in kind of the time and efforts that you guys have donated, I guess it's in the millions of dollars at this point, if we wanted to go outsource it and hire a professional firm to do it all for us. Right?
I don't know, I mean.
You don't have to answer it, but like, the reality is that there's a tremendous amount of goodwill that as a town, we need to place in credible people who are hopefully unbiased to bring their time and talents to help run a process that like no one else wants to do, or at least people with the credibility to be able to do it effectively. And even like, Mike, I'll ask you, like, as far as I know, there's 2 open seats on the warrant committee right now?
Yes.
So what should be the most prestigious committee in town, nobody wants to do it. And no, it's true. And why is that? Because
let him finish.
No, honestly, it's a good question. So Martha, you've been on board and you've seen what happens sometimes in this town. That you guys will passionately stand behind telling, you're the financial book of the town. You will say, do not vote for the following thing. But you see sometimes at town meeting, no matter what the finance people say, if the people in this town feel differently, they'll say, thanks for all your hard work and all the analysis, but we're saying yes anyways.
Then you still have that option.
Yeah, I'd like to restate my opinion, because that's not why I don't want to be on the panel. Because the work committee gets up and says, this is what we believe, we spent a lot of time looking at it. What do you think? We're not trying to count anybody else on the work committee, but people don't really want to be on the work committee because you put a lot of time and effort and you get beat up a lot.
That's my point, right? And it's part of public, small town politics. But right, all we have is our time and our talents, right? And we haven't talked about that if we go redo all this work for the next 2 years, what are the other 15 things that are important to the town that we're gonna miss out on? Because we're gonna go redo work, right? We're not gonna be able to do 40B. I moved to this town because I was excited about a new school and the state hospital. I've been here 7 years. I'm still waiting to be excited about the new school and the hospital, right? Don't really beat the crap out of each other when things don't go our way, right? And so I would respectfully submit one other thing I just like to say. I think as a townspeople, we are where we are, and to your point, moving forward, we have to assess risk. And the things that I'm concerned about on risk are a couple things. I'm concerned that as a person who happens to build 100,000 square foot buildings as part of his job, we're concerned about inflation. I think those numbers are underrepresented and
Those are September 2020 numbers.
I'm concerned about interest rates. So one of the other things I do as part of my job is we need to assess financial risk in terms of interest rates. So I actually looked, because we did this, and if we wanted to lock in today's rate for next year, because we wanted to delay it a year, okay, the cost of that would be a half a point. The cost of a half a point interest rate, right? Show hands, how many people refinance the mortgage over the last couple of years? Everybody? Rates are never gonna be lower than where they are. For every 1 point that interest rates go up between now and when we take it, it costs $10.3 million over the course of the loan. So it's okay, you can go back and do all the work. But as taxpayers, are you gonna be okay taking on that interest risk of wait, time is money. We can do it now, get ahead of the interest rate curve, get ahead of the cost curve, or we can kick the can down the line and just know that you're putting your money on the line when we do it. And the last risk I'll mention is, listen, like, I've come to appreciate, like, I think some of you know, like, I tried to help the schools this year. We did the Onward Initiative. Like, it was, I couldn't imagine, I couldn't appreciate it. I couldn't begin to appreciate when I started it, how much time it really took to do something effectively in this town. And when I look at people up here, like, if I just spent 2.5 years of my life and then had it washed down the drain because like people disagreed with it, I would walk. I wouldn't do it. So I think as you figure out your risk, you have to assess whether the people up here who know everything they're doing, who build schools for a living, are they going to be here in a year, 2 years to do it? Or are they going to walk? So I don't know. And like, obviously disruption, the last piece of it is, I guarantee you, if there's disruption here, where they go, especially for parents who have the kids right now in kindergarten, I guarantee that there'll be 750, 1,000 people here doing the same thing, and we'll put up signs all around town, people crap at each other on Facebook, okay? When we don't get our way, because nobody's gonna want the kids disrupted after they just went through COVID. So you have all these risks lined up for this, like, for what? And I personally don't understand it, but like I said, I'm not gonna change anybody's minds here. Everybody's here is minding up. The giant risks that we have in the town is the 3,000 people who haven't showed up or aren't uninformed at this point, and are listening to a whole bunch of rumor and innuendo. And but the last point we make is I take great offense when we go on in a paper and call out that a group of well-respected members of the community, credible, that they're spreading false rumors and innuendo in a piece of paper. I think that it's entirely disrespectful, and I'm just like ashamed that that's part of like the culture of our town. So.
Before I take another question, Bob Sliney from the Warrant Committee and School Building
I
Committee.
didn't know it was a distinguished board in there. All due respect to Mike and the board, I just want to make a comment. This has been giving me a lot of thought. I've lived in town for 28 years. This is my second school building project. Jim Bonifati, whom we are relying on, he saved the school project 20 years ago. So there's no question that there's no ulterior motive here to the exact opposite to the rest of the town. And we can all agree to disagree. I think the beauty of this meeting, I wish it was more of it, is the fact that we see each other in 3D. And we've been too much communication through Zoom, too much communication through editorial comments, too much. It's nice to be here and let's have dialogue, which is great. But the point I wanted to make really is, you talked about process. This is the beginning of the process and a recommendation from expertise and hard work. You can agree if you disagree. The process is, this is the legislation that sits in front of us. Each one of us sitting here and sitting there have the same vote. I've been on the Warrant Committee for 3 years. Over that course of time, we started with a deficit, a big deficit. At the end of which time, we delivered for the town a balanced budget with no override. That wasn't achieved without the school's commitment, without every department in town. The second year, we got confronted with the pandemic. Same situation, working with the deficit. Every town department, the town administrator has done a great job, brought people into this, brought information here, worked with all the departments. School department, Board of Public Works, police, chief delivered back to us this past year, money that wasn't spent coming back to us. Not what's gonna happen, it's just a reflection of how the town can work together. And now this year, we're going into this. What I implore you all to do is be open and be optimistic. This is a great town. There's a lot of points that are being made that says if we spend $5 million or 7 and amortize it over 25 years, we won't be able to pay the teachers. That's not true. We will pay the teachers. We will be able to find solutions, not because we're promising the future, because we've done it. And I say we, it's a collective board, and I'm the only one from the Warrant Committee, so I'm taking on that. I'm not speaking for everybody, I'm just telling you about process. This town works when it works together. And I just pray that you all continue to work together. Respect the people that are here. Every time I've had the opportunity over the past 3 years, we meet with every department, every committee, volunteers and employees. Couldn't be more impressed. What we got through this pandemic, because everybody pulled together. And there's no reason why the school project should be any different. Thank you.
In the back, the blue shirt.
Can I ask just a couple questions? And they're really like, I'll admit I've never been to any of these meetings, so full disclosure.
That's okay, we won't hold it against you.
In terms of Dale, we talked about the basement being an unusable space. It seems
For education.
Right, so it seems like cost per square foot isn't a good measure. What percentage of the basement of the square footage is the overall?
Was it 10%? It was somewhere, what, 12,000 square feet, something like that?
Yeah, basically, it was this building plus the other building, there's no basement in this building, so.
Yeah, this wing, which was added in the late 60s, and the modulars out there doesn't have a basement, but the rest of the facility does.
And then the other one was on the wheel lock option. We talked about modular facilities down like, potentially, but is there room for growth in terms of like if attendance for the schools comes in higher than kind of whatever the 70-year projection is? Can you build, like I know you said this building, for example, has like 3 buildings on the lot. Does that provide an option for you down the road if we do end up having higher enrollment? And then is it cheaper as a result of having the infrastructure put in place at Wheelock versus keeping it here?
Sure. So what I can tell you is that no matter what project we do, the MSBA requires us to think about and roughly, very roughly, plan for a 15% growth of the building. So any project has to be able to meet that standard. Now, what Wheelock site also allows us is if ultimately, there's some discussion about it, but Wheelock, in my mind, is probably the next school that would need replacement or renovation. And it still would allow us to do that in that location because it's a large enough site to allow for that. Whereas if we built here, it's unlikely we would be able to replace Memorial in its current location or expand it in its current location because of the tightness of the site.
And then my last question is, you mentioned the runoff on
Stormwater runoff, yep.
That Wheelock. Is that something that we ever have to fix down the road, or?
The Wheelock, yes. So I don't know about have to. It's something that ultimately the pavement is deteriorating and things like that. So it will need to be replaced eventually because it'll just become, rutted and potholes everywhere. I mean, there already are, as you can see, potholes like crazy over there. So replacement of that has been on the capital plan, the capital master plan, for a long time. So ultimately, it will sooner or later it'll deteriorate and will need to be replaced. And we're proposing to do it as part of this project.
What's that number? Since it's already.
We estimated that around 2 million. 1.5 or 2, about 2 million. Just for that portion of it, just for the portion of it that relates to Wheelock.
And that's not including building the plus drop off.
Correct.
Okay. So it's 4 million then.
This is a question for Bob. You're both here 28 years. How many votes did the high school renovation take? Town meeting, how many years to get that over the hump? It took 2 or 3, I seem to recall.
It was a vote, it was approved at town meeting, and then in the general election lost by less than 2%, which allowed under the then rules to be revoted if the selectmen allowed it. And at the time, I believe the reimbursement was 65%. So, and it was about to expire in 2000. My number may be not exact, but so we had a revote. So we had a revote in 2000, and it passed, and that allowed us to get 65%. Now there was a great deal of animosity that was generated, unfortunately, but I can tell you that in the subsequent 20 years, I don't think there was a town meeting where Mike Sullivan didn't say, "Boy, aren't we glad we got that done." So, it's just, they get through, and my point on the warrant committee is, I can assure you, no one is gonna ram anything through the warrant committee. And the context was made about, the warrant committee looks at everything in its totality, all right? We have a responsibility to manage a recommendation to your vote on a responsible budget that incorporates the best services we can provide with the revenue that's provided in our town. And there is no one, in my experience, and no one in any warrant committee that I've served with that takes nothing but extreme responsibility and understanding of the tax rates that we have incurred and that we're responsible for the real estate taxes. So if this deal doesn't make sense, it won't get the approval of the warrant. But there are trade-offs, both in terms of alternatives, and there are trade-offs in terms of short-term and long-term. That's a challenge because municipalities don't look long-term. And frankly, we have in the past not dealt with long-term well. I give Mike Marcucci and the team of selectmen, but also from his responsibility to the warrant committee, and Christine have worked very hard on building a plan that's sustainable, as reflected in the sustainability and reflected in the capital budgeting, that's reflected in the cash reserves that are being maintained. This town has worked very hard, and Christine's leadership has been spectacular, I'll tell you that, in the sense of being able to establish for us an opportunity to manage fiscally responsibly. So any implication that says we're going to throw this away in this context, it won't happen.
What's the timeline of the current relock? What's the meaningful use left?
The current relock?
Meaningful use.
There is no timeline because right now we're focused on this project. I would say maybe.
Is it 5 years, 10 years?
I would say 20.
In 20?
I think that building probably, with good care, could last us another 20 years. But again, most likely we would need to convince the MSBA to participate because, you know, as much as possible, we want the state's help. And so ultimately, you know, we want to be in a process, unless it changes, we want to be in a process where they're assisting us on these school projects because we fully recognize, this is the single most expensive project this town has ever embarked on. That's not lost on us. I can't give you a guarantee that it'll be 20 years, but that would be my personal, I don't know if anybody has any different opinion.
I'll say 4 years ago, we just put a new boiler in there through MSBA, so I think it's in good shape right now.
And I think you said that you think Willock would be next, so Memorial would be further down the road.
My personal, that would be my opinion, but other people may have different opinions.
Yes, hi. Hi, Mike. My name is Chrissy. We have not met yet. And
Nice to
I
meet you,
know I
Chrissy.
had some airtime, but I came to be informed and I learned so much and I appreciate everybody's time. But my question is, moving forward, you said that the committees need to vote on this non-binding petition on whether to consider it or not. Do you have a time frame on when that will happen?
I don't currently. We haven't discussed it. This is the first, you know, we voted to extend our submission to have this conversation. We have not discussed it as a committee in terms of when we will make that choice. The intention wasn't to do it here today.
Mike, sorry, Scott McDermott is in on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, can I unmute him and? I might need the mic so we can hear him. Hey, Scott, can you hear us? You're on deck, man. Maybe he's not.
Can you hear him?
He's muted.
Scott, if you hear us, unmute.
All right.
I hope we were getting away from Zoom, but yeah.
I know. So if people want to,
Can you put it in chat?
yeah. All right. He's not saying anything, but there is one from Regan Royston. Does everyone on the SBC reside in Medfield?
Yes, everyone except Dr. Martin.
Sorry, Scott.
Jerry?
Well, certainly, so I'm not paying my tax to teachers because they deserve respect. So I spoke in 2018 at the town meeting. There was a 6.17 override for you, for our town, for our kids, for our community. And it was controversial. I think there was a lot of anger and frustration, and our seniors were concerned about taxes. And I got up and spoke because I totally agree that our teachers and our students deserve to have the best facility possible. Every speaker at town meeting for the Dale at Dale Coalition wants a new school. There was no one that spoke at that meeting who said, my taxes are too high, help with the kids. To the point of the gentleman who's 7 years in the town, congratulations, it's a beautiful town. We've been here 28 years. So it seemed 28 is the magic number. Bob, you've been here 28 years, you've seen a lot, right? So what I would say to the community on why speaking up matters is what Mike said a couple of minutes ago. This is an $80 million project that will change the fabric of the town. Raising questions and challenging it is not crapping on committees. If they believe that, I know these people are putting in hundreds of hours and they care every bit as much about this town and our schools and our teachers. And we do too. I tried to be respectful on this, Martha, you mentioned about the board committee. The board committee, after 4 years of the state hospital committee making a recommendation, let's face it, was knee-deep in ripping that apart. They didn't just say, this is a group of professionals, let's just take their word for it. They asked very difficult questions and made them rerun the financials multiple times. So my question, Mike, is we saw a lot of numbers earlier tonight. First of all, could anyone read those numbers? Show of hands. A couple of people, you may have seen it on the phone. Okay.
I looked them up, to be fair, it's on the website.
This is not new information, and I'm happy to get them to people.
No, that's where I'm going with it. Those same numbers were presented in September. There were 15 options. There was walls of data. Mike, I want you to be upfront about this. How many times was that data presented to the public before that meeting?
Which data?
All of the presentation on the options, the final options with the costs and the designs. When was that presented to the public?
That was presented at, I'm gonna have to go back and look at all the agendas, but I know that was presented to the SBC. It was presented to the combined meeting between the SBC and the Board of Selectmen. And then it was presented at 2 community forums subsequent to that.
For the vote, the night of the vote was the first time that those numbers were presented.
The final estimates.
All the final estimates and the options, yes,
I don't
the final
recall.
numbers.
I'm sure you're trying to guide me to something that you already know, but that may be the case, I don't know.
It is because what we asked for, and this goes back to the comment earlier that Tracy had, all we asked for is the public forums before the vote with those numbers, to do what we're doing here before the vote was taken. Now, I know you think we're revisiting history. It is relevant. It is a very different thing. We have been in all those forums. And it is very different to present the data and say, the vote is done, but here's what we voted.
That wasn't the way it was presented.
Well,
the numbers were presented, there was discussion, public input was taken, and then we voted.
In one meeting. It had been promised there would be multiple forums, just like this.
Petition to get that on the agenda.
We asked, so to Tracy's point.
Public input has been taken at every single SBC meeting. Before you interrupt, it has been taken at every single SBC meeting. I put it on the agenda because everyone got so upset that it wasn't on the agenda. I put it on the agenda. Public input has never been disallowed at any SBC meeting, any subcommittee meeting, any Board of Selectmen meeting, all of those topics, all of these meetings, every single one has had public input. So let's be clear on that.
I agree there is public input, but let me be.
Every single one of them on video.
So can I say something? There is a very different purpose, and you know this. Leo, you know this. Jeff, I know you know this. Public input, we could be playing the ukulele and you don't have to answer. We can say whatever we want. A public hearing is different. You have to answer the questions. You have to.
Every question that was put into the meetings was responded to. Every single question.
I'm just going to say there was one session on an $80 million vote that we still are asking questions on months later and need clarification on. It needed more input, and that's what we have been articulating. Now, at the end of that, in 2 months, if you could show that there was support for Wheelock, that's democracy. I totally get it. But when the vote is already taken, the selectmen at the next meeting, the public forums afterwards, 2 of the 3 selectmen said they were already going to vote because the SBC had voted on something. It's fact, it's on recording. Mike Marcucci and Pete Peterson said they were ready to go. Gus was the only one who felt, and I appreciate that they had public forums, but it wasn't to change the mind. The second thing about it, it's long first. The second thing about it was there's been a school building communication committee meeting. There's been an SBC meeting since. There's been a school committee meeting since. And in every single one of those, not only wasn't there any appetite to have a dialogue on this and listen, it was just the opposite. You were doubling down. What was said about this forum was, we just haven't done a good enough job selling them on Wheelock.
That's,
No, that was said in this
that's
meeting.
your statement, not mine.
No, it was said, and we'll post the recordings. We just have to get out the younger people, they didn't show up at town meeting.
That's not the spirit of it,
Jerry, you're out of scope here, way out of scope. Again, you're trying to make it like it's some sort of conspiracy.
No, I'm just asking that
Dr.
we-
Marsden wants the building where he wants it, and you don't want to put it there.
Leo, I didn't say that. I'm raising these are valid
We
issues.
put a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen gave recommendation back. So based on your feedback, go see the recordings.
And we asked.
Go see your recordings where you pushed on the selectmen in those meetings.
Jerry, can I ask
So
you
he
a
went back
question?
and responded.
Absolutely.
You keep saying you support a school, but what you're really saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you only support a school if it's on your terms.
No,
Okay,
that's not the
so,
case.
so if we decide to proceed with the Wheelock, then you're saying you're gonna support that?
What I'm saying is if the town, I'm giving you the answer, and I've said this consistently. I said it actually to you, Mike Quinlan, before that meeting, which is if this vote goes through tonight without open public forums and engagement by the community before that vote, it will fail at town meeting. And we want it to pass. We're doing this not to fail the school. We're doing it because the last vote failed, painful for the town. We would rather have that discussion before we go into a November vote and go, gosh, I hope we get 2/3 is what we need. There hasn't been one public outreach yet that shows a majority even wants it to be one. I'm worried about that. I'm worried it's gonna delay unneeded buildings.
70% of 1,500 voters in the school committee election voted for, school committee members that supported the Wheelock.
38% of.
I know, I can quote all the numbers too.
They wanted it.
There's no clear direction in your way.
Let him
Let's be
finish,
honest.
don't interrupt him.
Thank you.
Could I come back to my question about process? What is, I don't want to, as, someone who hasn't made up their mind, get caught up in this
I
debate
understand,
between you
and I apologize for that if I did.
So this was a great forum, and I appreciate the work that's been done, and having been in the town for 27 years and volunteered a lot in the town, I know that, you can really get shit on for having passion about something. So what is the next step? How do we move it forward? I mean, there was a lot of good information here. Is Wheelock sort of how we're moving forward, or is,
I can tell you that our next SBC meeting is on 6/23, where we're going to discuss the outcome of this forum, and then, discuss what our next steps are. That's the only thing that we have currently planned. We wanted to do this forum before school lets out, because we know people go, people are finally gonna get back to normal lives, and that means going away in the summertime. So we wanted to make sure we had an opportunity before that happened. But we will be revisiting this on the 23rd and talking about the outcome, what we've heard from every one of you. And that's the only thing that we have currently planned.
I'm just curious that, hypothetically, if the building goes ahead and gets built on the lot site, and somebody says that the best thing to do with this building is to demolish it, what would or could then happen to this part of?
If it was demolished entirely?
Yeah, like what could go in here?
So under the deed, the grant from Hannah Adams staff donated this land, it has to be used for municipal use.
Which encompasses what?
Good question. So generally, mean easily any sort of government services like municipal use. I think in the past, when it was talked about, I think one former prominent member of the community thought senior housing could go here, and was wondering if that would be a municipal use or not. But it has to be a municipal use to fit in the original deed from. Yeah. So it's got to be probably a rec building or something else that's or not.
I'm sorry, right behind you first. He was up.
Can municipal use include generating revenue for the town? Just out of curiosity, like commercial space?
I believe so, yes. I mean, not commercial.
No.
But like, let's say you decided to put a photovoltaic array here, not proposing that, but, and that would generate revenue by, tax credits and all this other stuff. That's possible. Like, Parks and Rec is a revenue generating department, right? So yes, revenue, as long as it's run by the town, not something that's run by commercial entity. Yes.
Thank you. I have a question, and I don't know if you guys even know the answer, but as far as if we were to renovate or do one of the options here, how big would, this building, the height of it, how big would it look in comparison to the police and fire station? Would it be comparable? Would it be taller?
The easiest reference is to take the building next door, the 1941 building, and if you look at the peak of the roof line, that would be about the same height as the majority of the building for the 2-story height space. Then there are some other spaces that are a story and a half, like a gymnasium or cafeteria. But the classrooms would be on 2 floors.
But everything.
It would be approximately 30 or so feet, about that height. It would be basically in the options that we looked at there, it's going to be closer to the road in order for it to fit. So it will be a little bit closer to the Adams Street neighborhood.
So it's big.
I know we're over our time. This is a good conversation. I do want to respect it's Sunday afternoon, but I'm willing to go a little bit further if you are. If there's still more questions, I've got one over here.
It's just so you can understand, I'm here because A, I haven't been on it before. And I'm not coming with any agenda, I don't have any conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
The way I'm looking at it is, and this is where I'm looking for the numbers and just trying to figure it out. If I get $1 and I put $1 on Dale Street, we're gonna be able to build a new building here, that's awesome. If I put $1 on Wheelock, but I know I have to put another $1 over here at some point, what I'm looking at is I just want to put the $1 in once and get this taken care of, get a new building here, and then, but if we do Wheelock, then we have to figure out again more money. What are we going to do? That's really what I'm wrestling with. It's no conspiracy who wants what, where it's going to play. It's just, why wouldn't we want to try to do just one spend right here? And then we know we have to look at, like, I feel bad. Again, having been head of Parks and Rec back in the day, they keep getting hand-me-downs. They're getting hand-me-downs for everything. So if we gave the seniors a great new center, we gave the highway department a new center, we gave the police a new center. So to give the kids a new school would be awesome. And I don't think we have to try to renovate. But that's honestly what I'm here for. That's why I was asking some of the questions.
No, that's a fair question.
The ability
Fair
to do
question.
what we want to.
Yeah.
And you guys, I know, put a ton of time in there. It is, I so appreciate what you're saying, because everyone has to go to these meetings if they volunteer. And it's after work. I called in from Singapore one meeting to listen to a vote at town meeting, and it was when we lost, which was a bummer. But it takes time and energy. And so tonight, I appreciate it. I think the more you continue to share, because I was at graduation parties this weekend, and I gave that analogy, and there were a lot of people like, oh yeah, I'm not putting $2 down. Tell me why I should be doing $1. So that's just a message to you as you're trying to push this forward.
So, it's just not about the dollars though, right? I think that's part of the whole pros and cons. So I agree with you 100%, right? We weren't tasked with what to do with this school if it wasn't the chosen site. It wasn't really the basis of the committee. Unfortunately, the MSBA doesn't care what we do with the school if it's not our site, right? So I agree with that question, and it's a great question. We need to ask it in the town. But generally speaking, when we look at it, I'll just speak for me now. When I looked at this project, I said, what was best for these kids? What was best? What did our educators say? What did the school? What did the the educational program that they come up with? What's the best location for that? Okay, and that was really the basis of my decision. We don't live in a town like Newton or Milton where we have to cram a 98,000 square foot building into a postage stamp, 10-acre site. We have space. So when I looked at it from my perspective, I had in my head, $1 here, $1 there. Like, why would I want to spend it twice, right? Totally agree with you. But the other factors of what was best for our children, which my kids will go through this school, was that's a better site, that's better for our teachers, it's better for our educators, it's better for our children. And that really was the basis of my decision. So I love your question. I think it's actually probably the most important one in regards to the site selection. If you ask me, that is the absolute crux of the issue, especially for the undecided voters. And I think it's very valid. But I didn't, and I went through it myself. But I looked at that site, I looked at what the educators came up with in their countless hours and year-long meeting, did a year and a half, I would say, with Arrow Street in this program that they came up with at that site made the most sense. And it seemed like it was.
Hold on, Mike. I just want to address your question real quick. I just want to add one thing. Building a new school here doesn't solve all other problems as well. The Parks and Rec doesn't go away because, right, so we're still gonna have to fix that, okay? I think to Mike Marcucci's point is, if we're only gonna address this and we're not gonna try to solve the Parks and Rec problem as well, then the worst scenario is demolishing this building, right? We want to, if that's the worst case scenario, and it has a liability of about 1.8 million. So that is an option, if we could demolish this building. And what I can tell you is Parks and Rec is supportive of the idea of reusing this building for them for the short term, where they, you know, have very minor modifications, to a longer term, which would include adding a real gym, but still using the classroom space for their classroom exercises. They're supportive of that. They perhaps because they've been beaten down for so long and you know, always been sort of the, you know, oh, we can put you off longer, we can put you off longer, that they'd be happy with anything at this point, and I feel bad for that. But what I can tell you is, like, the reason the wheel lock is more expensive is because we're solving another problem with it. We're solving the bus drop-off pavement issue. It's not that we're throwing $2 million away. We're spending it and investing it because it makes sense for that site. We could not do that, but we chose, like, if we're gonna do this site, we're gonna do it right, and it costs $2 million more. And that's we have to look at it as, ultimately, we have to put forward the best project that we can for this town. And the town absolutely has the right to vote it down. And that may or may not happen, I don't know. But we're putting forth what we feel is the best option at this stage of the game.
Quick question. The water line on Elm Street, was that mentioned that had to be done as well? Was that?
Yes, yes, that was the other one of the differences between the two sites.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm sitting here listening, you know, absorbing what people are saying. And, you know, everybody has the reason they're here.
Sure.
On this beautiful day,
I know.
changing their plans. And everybody's got a reason. And I don't have kids in the school, I'm not a one family, but I appreciate that. If I was there, I'd probably be fighting. No matter what happens, teachers deserve a new school. They deserve a nice place to teach, no matter what. For me, just if I boil it down to where I want to live, and I've been in the town 28 years. When I first moved here, the water.
Did you all move together, or like?
It's a big year.
It's a big year. What happened 28 years ago?
Brothers by another mother. The water was delicious. Okay? The water's not delicious anymore.
Okay.
It's changing, and we're gonna spend 12 million, because we're gonna take out the manganese, which hasn't been bad so far, but okay. It is about the water. What I hear tonight is we built stuff, and then we, as a town, we somehow struggle a little bit to take care of it. It decays and.
That has been the past history. Certainly.
Maybe we change that.
We've done a lot to change that, but I won't. I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you.
No matter what, whatever happens, I don't want MWR rating. No, I don't want this town to be buying water from someone else.
Agreed.
Because it's polluting. It's got contaminants. John Thompson will tell you all day long. I want to turn on the tap, put it in the Brita, and have water. I don't want bottled water. And I'm not saying that the school really is directly, if it goes there, yes, you know, there are impacts, maybe not significant, but regardless, engineering things will have to be in place, right? And practices will have to be in place to limit the possibility of contamination. Because we do have to supply water to everybody, okay? Not just the 300-400 kids in a building, is the residents of this town. So no matter what happens, we have to spend time and understanding to make sure, no matter where the school is, that we protect that asset. Because we don't want to be in a room like this saying, holy crap, you know, we're Acton, Massachusetts, we got PFAS, we're screwed, everybody needs bottled water. That's not what needs to happen. So these are the things we have to roll in and continue to maintain to make sure that we can turn on the tap, have water.
Are you suggesting those don't exist today?
I'm saying that in this building, we know that we're gonna have to mitigate, you know, with parking, you're gonna have stormwater detention.
Can I clarify that you'd have to do that on either site?
Yes,
Yes, I'm saying yes, no matter what. I keep
Yeah,
saying,
correct.
no matter
We're
what
not doing
happens.
that now at all, right?
Correct.
No,
We're not doing that
No
at
matter
all.
what happens,
Right.
when we do a renovation.
Right, whether it's here or there, yeah, all
We
right,
have to put we have to put the engineering in
Correct.
place,
absolutely.
and we have to put the practice. Here's what's scary, and it's down the road. We have to fund it. There are people that are gonna have to be responsible for it. And they're already like, geez, I got the Dale building, now I got the, like, we have to fund it, we have to staff it. In other words, there's facilities.
What is,
there's
I'm sorry, what did you say,
operations,
fund operations? Yes.
Sure. Like maintaining a stormwater pollution prevention plan, that's required, whether it's certainly during construction, but afterwards. You know, there's maintaining roof systems, maintaining parking, making sure that we don't store and use certain materials on the parking lot. You know, we have to follow this, I guess you call it an order of conditions.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that no matter where it is, how it is, we do it right, so that we do not jeopardize the whole.
I completely agree with you. And again, there's nothing different about how we would design the building if it was at Wheelock or Dale when it comes to that. So I absolutely hear you. I'm all for it. I completely agree with you. But I can tell you that the building would be no different, no matter if it's at Wheelock or Dale.
And the only other thing possible is, yes, it's open space. We know that construction is gonna be ring fenced for a couple of years. I don't know if people are gonna have access to it or what that's gonna be like in the future.
Access to,
Like the back, the road, the woods, the fields.
yes, the intention is to maintain access to the trails and the Holmquist land and the fields during construction.
Two questions. One, does the demolition of this building, is it included in the budget for the Wheelock location?
Currently, no, because again, we're attempting to reuse this building. But if we need to shift, if the town says, hey, we'd rather you just demo it rather than provide it as a new facility that'd be something we'd have to evaluate. But again, we have the numbers for that, which amount to about.
Conceivably, that could be paid as part of the regular building capital plan. We're carrying, I think, $11 million for this building in our existing 20-year municipal building plan. Conceivably, if you didn't have this building, you could drop that from 11 to 2.
Can't get your money.
Oh, I'm sorry, pay for it out of our regular municipal building fund rather than as part of the bond.
So it'd be like a town general budget expenditure.
Yeah, we have a municipal building stabilization fund that is funded yearly for building maintenance and the point about maintaining buildings true. So a couple of years ago, Francesco, part of that. And so as part of that 20-year plan, the plan assumed this building would be here. I think it's $11 million in there for Dale Street in that plan. And so if you did go to Wheelock, you decided to demolish this, it wouldn't necessarily have to be part of the bond, but it's a cost to the town either way. You have to make a judgment from a financial perspective, is it better to put it in bond and pay interest on it, or if we pay it out of the existing stabilization fund and not pay interest on it, we pay it out of that. That would be a financial judgment kind of at the end.
And then on the environment, the new fields that we built in lieu of the existing fields, that we allow, was the environmental study including any constraints around converting that, whatever it is now, into an active use field? Is that something that?
I'm sorry, converting what to an active use?
So you're building new like soccer
Correct.
fields
Yep.
and the Wheelock location is basically gonna sit on top of where they currently play and stuff, right?
Correct.
So if you're gonna add fields on the other side of that, was the environmental study for the use of that field as converted from whatever?
It would be no different than the adjacent fields, right? So we have all those fields that are currently there. We're just adding another one. We're just expanding the existing use.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I did want to address, because you brought up a very good point. We have spent years, many years. I have not been here 28 years. I've been here 14 years. And been involved as the chair of the permanent building committee for almost 10 now. And one of the things I quickly realized when I came to town was we had all these needs, right? We needed a new DPW, we needed a new public safety building. The school was on the radar, Parks and Rec is on the radar. These aren't new issues, they go back at least a decade, if not more. And I quickly realized that if we're gonna invest this kind of money, our current operational model wasn't working. I pushed along with the permanent building committee, pushed to bring on as we brought on new buildings and that are more complex and that have more requirements for maintenance, that they be taken care of properly. Because one of the reasons we were facing all those issues was because we weren't caring for our buildings. We're not a developer. We don't flip, you know, and we don't care about long-term investment. These are nothing but long-term investments for this town, and that matters. So we pushed for bringing on Amy Colleran, who I don't think is here today, as a director of facilities. Actually, it was the position, but ultimately we hired Jerry McCarty first, and then he left, and we now have Amy Colleran to make sure that we have a plan in place. That led to further discussion, which is when we created the Municipal Capital Stabilization Fund, because we weren't putting enough money into maintenance. And so things were being neglected, and then they would go from small issues to big issues. So we have moved forward. We're going to continue to. As these buildings get more complex, we're talking about proposing a net zero energy building. It's a complex building. We need to make sure our facility staff are properly trained in how to maintain those facilities, and that proper service contracts are in place for that area that they can't maintain. So I can absolutely agree with you. If we're going to invest $80 million or more in a building, we want to make sure that it's well taken care of and lasts beyond the 50-year cycle that the MSBA looks at.
If there's any savings from the project, no matter where it's located, can we pave North Street?
That's a question for the DPW director, I guess, but what is it, Anna?
There's a question through Zoom from Regan Royston, and it says, another question, do any of the members of the SBC work in real estate development, school building consulting? I'm late to this, but I feel that this is being rushed through, and I don't quite understand why. Are any members of the SBC directly or indirectly benefiting monetarily via associate vendors from the new school development? How was Arrow Street brought in, and was there an RPF done initially? There's a lot there.
That's a lot there. So let me start with the background of the SBC. So myself and Tim Bonfatti, we are what the term in Massachusetts is called an owner's project manager. We manage projects for MSBA projects, major universities throughout Massachusetts. So we manage school construction projects for a living. Mike Weber owns and operates a subcontracting firm that called Gaston Electric. They're a major electrical subcontractor. Tom Herb, most of you know, Tom builds clocks that go all over the world. Tom is internationally recognized for his clock building.
And donate clocks.
And donates, yes, you'll see them around town. 35 years. And then, so that's it for building professionals. We have 2 school committee members. Oh, sorry, Walt was not here today. Walt Kincaid works for a major construction manager. None of us, I guarantee you, see any financial benefit from this. Matter of fact, I won't see any benefit. My kids won't take any part in this. My kids are beyond Dale. I think that's true for my taxes will go up. But I don't think, I mean, Mike and your kids see any benefit to the school? Just Mike.
Just Mike.
And Mike is the only one who has a child who will see a benefit. The rest of us do not.
Mike, you stay on schedule, and Anna, who's sitting in the back here, will be the last 5th grade class.
Just in time. So no, what was the other
Okay, so
question?
that, is anyone?
Oh, Arrow Street.
Yes.
This isn't a new process. We've mentioned, like, this goes back, the first statement of interest went to the MSBA in 2012 under Bob McGuire. Once Bob McGuire retired, we brought in Dr. Marsden. Dr. Marsden submitted a statement of interest to the MSBA in 2016, 5 years ago. We weren't accepted into the program until the end of 17, after another SOI was issued. So we've been working since 2017 on this project, as we've gone through the phases of the MSBA program. So it is not something that is new. We recognize not everybody has heard about it or been up to date on all the information, but this has been ongoing. We've well over 50 public meetings since, and then we hired. We go through the process. We hired Left Field, Lynn Stapleton is here with us today as our owner's project manager. And then we hired Arrow Street as our designer, going through the MSBA process to bring them on. So that is the process.
What does an owner's project manager do?
What does an owner's project do for us? Basically manages the process, manages budget, manages schedule. They coordinate, make sure the meetings are happening, are all documented. Basically they sort of run the process. They'll walk us through and help us with construction and procurement if this goes to construction. So there's a lengthy list, but that's some of it.
Sorry, effectively, if you go out and hire a general contractor to work for you, it's effectively an advocate to make sure the general contractor is doing what they should do.
Yeah, if you think about it, if I'm a private entity, right, I'm doing all that work, I'm hiring a contractor, I'm hiring an architect. Towns don't have staff that can sometimes do, I should say, but because know who it does, right? Medium. Well, so some towns have in-house staff who can manage projects on a day-to-day basis. We do not. So the law requires in Massachusetts that we hire an owner's project manager to manage the entire process and make sure that it's following all the procurement law and all that.
So, you mentioned so the next SBC meeting is June
23rd.
And you'll have cost reductions at that point?
That's the plan, yeah.
So what is the plan for having more definitive numbers on partner record use of Dale?
I don't have a timeline for that. I've asked for them to come back to me with some information by Friday the 18th. I haven't seen it yet, obviously, we're not there yet. But I've asked them for that so that they can give us, and what that is I've asked them to give us, looking at it from a code perspective, what is the absolute minimum that we need to do to move Park and Rec into this building the day after the school opens. If that were to happen, what would that look like? And then we can take that information and get some rough cost estimates associated with it.
And the permanent building planning committee also provide data in terms of future maintenance costs of having two buildings on the town inventory.
I'll have to talk to the it's a different architectural team. The Parks and Rec secured feasibility study money, I forget what year, but, and they haven't finished their feasibility, which is why their architect is now looking at this as part of their feasibility study. I can ask them to look at it from that perspective, but I don't believe they had engineers on board because it was just a feasibility study. It wasn't a full project design. So we'll look into it. I don't have an answer for you.
Because I mean, the fact is, if the school gets built at Wheelock, Park and Rec comes over, takes over Dale, we're then gonna have two buildings to then maintain instead of.
It depends. I mean, one of the things. What? Right, the idea was to demo the FAF as well. And that's, again, we have some money left over from the public safety building savings that we would also apply to that. And so that's the.
Neon light.
And then, just go back to what I just feel I have to address this because having been to all these meetings and having sat through both in person, public safety building and on Zoom. And as I'm sitting there listening to 2 hours of a lot of in-depth, complicated financial data, building data, and having a running list of maybe 10 questions at the end of these meetings, the meetings would, all the questions had to be held to the end. And at the end of the meeting, it would be, we've been here a long night and we'll only take 1 or 2 questions. So the one or two questions on my list meant that there were 8 or 9 that were still left.
I never limited questions. I time that I should question when there was nothing left. It was all done by Zoom. Nothing left in the queue. There was one evening went 4.5 hours. So I'm sorry. Listen, you look at every question.
I have my list of questions. Then I would ask for say, okay, I was 10. We only have 1 or 2, and you didn't cut it off. So all I'm saying is that it's very, very helpful. And especially on Zoom, I would ask a question, I would get a response, and then it would be done. I would be able to ask clarification. So it's very, very.
And you email me multiple times without changing.
In fact, I would say, I don't have time to answer these right now, I'll get back to you, and then I would get these. So
Never heard of it.
So my 2017 facility, and this is look at your they did an estimate for redoing this for any other purpose in the 2017 facility analysis.
I don't think it was for any other purpose, it was looking at the facility to bring in return.
No, it's a office.
To be honest, I don't have it memorized.
That was the big thing about it, like that, and my six things never spent it, and I may agree, but at that time, they said $17 million to bring it up to code for reuse for office or recreation space. So my question is, that was in 2017, with the same cost as skyrocketing in doing the school building project. You know, again, I'm not saying we vote it, I'm trying to scare if we're gonna do it, but if Park and Rec is gonna try to use this again, there's some numbers between the 1.8 million down and somewhere around the 18, 20, 25 number.
Still range.
It's not gonna be cheap. I think
Are you
that's.
talking about short term or long term?
Actually, I mean, I can short term bring it up to code for public buildings.
Well, that's the thing, we believe we're working in code, we don't have the final answer, we believe there's a way to move them in, continue to use bases such that we don't have to fix every problem in this facility in short term.
Thank you.
I need to confirm it. Don't say it's done. And so, you know, they're working on that, advocates, other is working on that. We believe we can do it for much shorter money than 18 million. If they say, no, it's 18 million, it's not an option, we'll take that off. I don't think that's an option, we'll probably take that off the table.
It won't pass warrant. I think either way.
It
won't pass warrant committee. The idea is that it would be temporary. It won't happen. Right, the idea would be at Parks and Rec, if could it give you 6 or 7 years until we paid off the public safety building bonds, paid off the DPW bonds, and our debt's in a little better shape. The idea is to essentially kick the Parks and Rec can down the road again, and kick that can down the road for 35 years, carrying on the great Medfield tradition, as a bridge. Because as I said earlier, the future of Parks and Rec depends on the FAF Center. So if the FAF Center is gone, we have to do something for Parks and Rec, either decide we're not going to have the Parks and Rec building, be a choice, or build a new one, right? And this is do we have an opportunity here to give them an interim solution to get out of our current debt situation? The answer may be no, in which case we'll demolish this building, and Parks and Rec will be limited to what they can get after hours in other buildings in town for programs. They won't be able to run programs during the day, during the school year, most likely, right? So if we end up in that situation, if we can do it for short dollars, we get it just from a layman's perspective, a Parks and Rec building should be easier from a code perspective than the school. So if it's safe to be a school, it should be in practical reality, not necessarily government regulatory reality. In practical reality, it's safe to have Parks and Rec programs. Whether we're allowed to do that or not, we got to find that out. But that would be a stopgap, because the reality is we've built a lot of buildings. We've built a lot of buildings in the last 20 years, and we didn't build a lot of buildings in the 30 years before that. So we have this backlog because we had not been keeping up with our capital projects, not keeping up with our buildings.
And I think that's a key point, is one of the things that we're looking at is when you factor into the taxes, right, is how much debt are we taking on at any one point? As of, those looking at it at town meeting, as of this year, we have the lowest debt, overall debt in the town in over 2 years. So we're in a good position to be doing this. In my opinion, the warrant committee will have their choice as well. And so the idea with the Park and Rec using this facility is that we could do a short-term solution that allows them to get to a point before we do a renovation project for them, where the DPW starts to come on the books, where after the public safety goes off the books. So look at the timeline, that's stretching that need to do a full project out 6 or 7 years beyond the opening of the school, so that we can take some time for that other debt to roll off the books. So,
as a follow-up to that, can we do a serious analysis of the question we've asked about using capacity here for Park and Rec, over that if it was built here, the excess capacity for the same period of time, 6 or 7 years, if we're 200 under in enrollment, can we at least put some kind of pen to paper on what that could look like for the town from a cost standpoint? Just as a point of comparison on.
This getting back to your suggestion about a combined facility?
Yes.
Still, I thought the suggestion was build a school.
Yes.
And use the extra classrooms for Parks and Rec.
Yes, and let's look what the revenue looks like.
But
for
the
that
question is, number one, legally, can you do that? In other words, can you have non-school personnel in a school building on this at the same time as school? What would that cost legally? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. And then you could also do that wheel, right? I mean, you could do wheel out, you could also use the excess space there for parking.
Yeah, I mean, the MSBA, who follows up, they follow up after the project is done.
You can do community. Like you can't do a program, make it a program.
Right.
For another town.
I don't know if everybody heard that, but maybe Tim, you can. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you, Megan, sorry.
You do a community use. In other words, you can have Saturday morning basketball, things like that. You can't house another town program inside the school. You can try to sneak it in, but like Mike said, they'll come in a year later and do a post-occupancy check. And then we get penalized on the grant. You can't sort of officially designate it as Park and Rec space.
No, I was talking about just for the program.
Yeah, just let him use the expertise. He has expertise.
But I'm just
You
saying.
have an opinion. Let's leave it there.
Fine.
It's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, Jerry. That's enough.
But you can't
Please.
do it as Park and Rec space.
I think people are getting.
Listen, I just want to say thank you.
We do have a program right now at the high school that is not a high school program, the outreach, but we have to have security and there's something that we lost in school.
Do whatever you want.
Bill, you had one other comment?
No, listen, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all the school committee members who said. Like, I totally appreciate all the time that people who come before us, that's what it is, to make the town what it is. And I totally appreciate your right to be an active citizen and question and diligence and ask questions. And I think one of the challenges, like I keep on running to, is the culture of the town is that like where is the difference between, challenging understanding versus like auditing and nitpicking. I think that's something as a town we got to deal with so we can move forward. Right? I think it's time we got to extend professional responsibility for people who do this for a living and rely on it. And again, I've said it before, but I do appreciate it, and people have the right to do it, right? And it's the volume and the credibility of the data and everything that's coming out where we've kind of gotten to this really crappy feedback with this town where everybody, like on top of everything, everywhere, is sticking to like very concrete, succinct facts. I think we'd all do everything for a service to just turn down the rhetoric a little bit, focus on the key facts, and then make an honest, informed decision. And the last thing back is like, and Bob, I don't know from the marketing perspective, but like this idea of like interest rate risk and where we go from here is something that's very real, and it's going to hit everybody in the tax bill. And it's like nobody has a crystal ball, so you don't know where it's going. But everything the data says it's going up. And money we're going to spend today is going to be extremely more expensive tomorrow. And it's just something that as we have this conversation as a town, and I think that we need to focus a little bit more on because it's real and it's going to come out of everybody's budgets, and there's no way to solve for it. It is what it is when you get to it, right?
Nice. Yeah, so I think one of the things too about having Parks and Rec, is one of the things I've always been excited about the concept. I have nothing to do with that project, right? But one of the concepts here is that they will be expanding space, right? And when you run a program in a town as a municipality, you have to build over time what works in town, what attractions, what continues to generate and program. Generally, those are self-supporting, right? They're generating in town. Community education program, very simple, right? So when you don't have the actual space to operate, you're always operating around someone else's schedule. It's very hard to program. And envisioning programs. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us as a community about what this building could be with what is in place today, right? You're talking about a stage, you're talking about a small auditorium, you're talking about another gymnasium rented out. You're talking about this space. I'm not sure if anyone part athlete lately, but it's higher, right? It's higher. So I think
really quick, because I'm gonna wrap this up, so we've already gone, we're almost an hour beyond our schedule.
For you and Tim, just on the whole, it's been fascinating, except for the sub-communications meeting with Tim, you had mentioned that volatility of the market right now, and how pricing right now keeps changing basically every 2 weeks, right? In terms of
The past couple of months has been very hard. Yep.
So I guess my question is, like, you've gotten you're curious to look do a little bit of research on what's going on in construction, steel, cement, and everything else. And it's been interesting to see what the pandemic done and demand, right, for building and everything else.
It's actually more on the supply side than the demand side. Demand is part of it, yeah.
Residential.
On the residential, yes, but longer, yes.
So I guess my question is, I'm very curious about Bill, once we get out of this pandemic, post-pandemic, is there a chance that this will stay, say,
It will.
with my mind, with the projection in terms of
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be rich man.
What's the best information to actually like in terms of trade radiation, things like that?
I can tell you that, because we are constantly working with cost estimators, and we're constantly getting feedback on bids, and none of them are professionals, none of them know where it's going, no one will predict where it's going. But I can tell you what's going on. And what we've seen is basically a 10%, roughly 10% increase in material pricing over the last 6 months or so. And it's been somewhat offset. There's still a little softness on the labor side, which helps to offset some of that. But that won't last forever as demand picks up. In non-residential construction, demand is not growing rapidly. Residential construction is through the roof, and that's why you see lumber up 300%. However, nobody can predict when it's going to end. You know that there's all sorts of things that factor into it. Trucking, like you can't find enough people to. They can't hire enough people to drive trucks right now, so it's harder for people to get. What's that?
You couldn't get truckers before the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the point is, I don't know when it'll end. What I can tell you is that it will probably normalize. It will probably go back to a 4%, 5% level. But even I've been through a couple of recessions in construction in my career. Prices never went down. Even during a recession, they flatten off for a little while, but then they start back up. So I can tell you that they will continue to rise. I'm hopeful that it stabilizes before we go to bid. If the town approves of the project, we wouldn't bid for another almost a year. So it would be in the I believe late summer 2022. And so hopefully by then things will stabilize to a point where but we would be doing continual checks.
I just can't stop thinking about the comment about the money graduation party, talking about, you know, $1 here, $1 there, $1 there. I just pray that after seeing pros and cons on slides this meeting and reading letter that wrote that conversations around the community about roads is what I want. And really that focus of what's best for the kids and best for the town. And I just hope that we have that in mind and read these pros and cons and think about what we're saying and we're into this every day and start spreading that conversation around the community.
Eventually, I appreciate it. We'll have more time to talk. It's been 3 hours. Thank you all for spending the afternoon with us. I need a motion to adjourn. Leo,
Second.
Leo Brown, Mike Monson, Tom Earl, Mike Weber, and Mike Monfort. Okay, and
Thank you.
Leo, second. And roll call.